They say you can judge a man by his shoes. In the grand ballroom of Sterling Tower, surrounded by millionaires in Italian leather, Jack Turner wore scuffed work boots. And nobody saw him coming. The janitor. The nobody. The single father who mopped their floors and swallowed their insults with silent dignity. But when three armed men burst through those gilded doors, when the laughter died and the champagne stopped flowing, everyone would learn the truth. The most dangerous man in the room had been invisible all along. Stay with me until the end of this story, and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this tale travels. The Sterling Tower rose 43 stories above the city's skyline, like a monument to ambition itself, its glass and steel facade catching the last rays of autumn sunlight and scattering them across the harbor below. Tonight, the building's crown jewel, the Grand Meridian Ballroom on the 40th floor, blazed with the kind of light that only money could buy. Crystal chandeliers the size of compact cars hung from coffered ceilings, each one dripping with enough diamonds to fund a small nation's education budget. The marble floors, imported from quarries in Carrara, gleamed like frozen milk beneath the feet of 372 of the city's most influential citizens. This wasn't just a party. This was a coronation. Isabella Lane, CEO of Sterling Enterprises and the youngest woman to ever helm a Fortune 500 company, stood near the eastern windows in a dress that cost more than most people earned in a year. Midnight blue silk clung to her frame with the kind of precision that only haute couture could achieve, and diamonds, real ones, not the cubic zirconia her competitors secretly wore, glittered at her throat and wrists. At 38, she had everything the world told women to want: power, wealth, beauty that turned heads, and a reputation that made boardrooms tremble. But if you looked closely, and almost nobody did, you could see the tightness around her eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them, the unconscious habit she had of glancing toward the exits every few minutes, as if calculating escape routes. "Ms. Lane?" Her assistant Marcus Chen appeared at her elbow with the silent efficiency of a man who'd learned to anticipate his boss's needs before she voiced them. He held a tablet displaying the evening's schedule, though both of them had memorized it hours ago. "The mayor just arrived. Senator Williams is asking about the infrastructure proposal, and your 3 o'clock with the board tomorrow has been moved to 2:30. Isabella nodded, her public smile firmly in place. "Tell the mayor I'll be with him in 5 minutes. Assure the senator that the proposal is everything we discussed. No surprises. And Marcus?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping below the threshold of nearby conversations. "They're here for me tonight, aren't they?" It wasn't really a question. Marcus understood what she meant. The photographers, the journalists, the influencers with their ring lights and smartphone cameras, all of them circling like sharks who'd scented blood in the water. Tonight was supposed to be Isabella's triumph, the official announcement of Sterling Enterprises' expansion into 3 new markets, a move that would cement her legacy and add another $3 billion to the company's valuation. "They're definitely here for you, Say," Marcus confirmed, allowing himself a small, genuine smile. "CNN, Bloomberg, even that insufferable podcast host from Tech Titans Weekly. You're the story tonight, Ms. Lane. Enjoy it." But enjoying it required something Isabella hadn't felt in 6 weeks: safety. The threats had started in late August, delivered through channels that should have been impossible to penetrate. The first arrived via a private email account she used for exactly 3 people. The message was brief. "We know what you did. We know what you took. Payment comes due October 19th. No signature, no demands, just that ominous promise hanging in digital space like a curse." Isabella had immediately contacted her head of security, a former Secret Service agent named Richard Moss, who'd protected 2 presidents before retiring to the private sector. Moss assembled a team, hired consultants, brought in cybersecurity experts who charged 5 figures for their opinions. They traced the email to a server in Estonia, then to another in Singapore, then to a third in Brazil before the trail went cold in a maze of VPNs and encrypted tunnels. The second threat came through her office phone, her private line that only board members and her executive team knew. A voice, digitally distorted, whispered, "October 19th, Sterling Tower. We'll be watching." The call lasted 11 seconds. Moss's team traced it to a burner phone purchased with cash at a convenience store in New Jersey. The store's security footage showed a person in a hoodie and mask who could have been anyone. The third threat was the worst because it showed they could reach her anywhere. She'd been in her penthouse apartment, 42 floors above street level, in a building with security that rivaled Fort Knox when she found it. A single black rose on her pillow, thorns removed, with a note tied to the stem. Soon was all it said. That was 3 weeks ago. Since then, Moss had tripled her security detail, installed facial recognition software at every entrance to Sterling Tower, and coordinated with the FBI, though the federal agents had been frustratingly candid about their limitations. Without a clear threat, without demands or a known suspect, there was little they could do beyond advise caution. So tonight, Isabella Lane wore her diamonds and her designer dress like armor, smiled for the cameras, and pretended that her heart wasn't racing every time the ballroom doors opened. Across the room, near the service entrance that led to the kitchen facilities, Jack Turner pushed a gray industrial mop bucket into position and began the methodical work of maintaining floors that didn't need maintaining. At 6 feet 2 inches, he had the kind of frame that should have drawn attention: broad shoulders, the lean muscle of a man who stayed in shape without trying. But something about the way he moved made people's eyes slide right past him. The psychology of invisibility, Jack knew, wasn't about being small or quiet. It was about meeting expectations so perfectly that your presence became wallpaper. Wear the right uniform, carry the right tools, move with the right combination of purpose and deference, and you could walk through a room full of people who would swear under oath that they'd been alone. Tonight, Jack wore dark blue work pants, a matching shirt with sterling maintenance embroidered over the breast pocket, and steel-toed boots that had seen better decades. His hands, covered in work gloves, gripped the mop handle with the casual efficiency of a man who'd done this job 10,000 times before. To everyone in the ballroom, the CEOs and philanthropists, the politicians and media personalities, the influencers and old money aristocrats, Jack Turner was furniture. Useful furniture, perhaps, but no more worthy of acknowledgement than a coat rack or a fire extinguisher. And that was exactly how he wanted it. "Daddy, look what I drew!" The voice came from a small alcove near the service entrance, a recessed space normally used for storing extra chairs during smaller events. Tonight, it had been transformed into an impromptu waiting area where Jack's 9-year-old daughter, Ella, sat cross-legged on a cushioned bench with her coloring book spread around her like a rainbow explosion. Jack glanced toward the ballroom's center. Isabella Lane was engaged in conversation with someone whose jewelry could fund a small hospital, then moved to the alcove with his mop bucket. To any casual observer, he was just checking on a spill or adjusting the humidity mats. "Show me, baby girl," he said, kneeling beside her. Ella held up her drawing with the pride of a gallery artist unveiling their masterwork. It showed 2 figures, one tall, one small, holding hands beneath a sky full of stars. The proportions were off, the perspective skewed in the way of children's art, but the love that had gone into every crayon stroke was unmistakable. "That's us," Ella explained unnecessarily, pointing to each figure. "You and me. I made the stars extra sparkly because I know you like stars." Jack felt something twist in his chest, that peculiar mixture of love and guilt that had become his constant companion since his wife died 3 years ago. Sarah had been the sun their family orbited around, and when cancer took her, it had left a void that no amount of time or adjustment could completely fill. "It's perfect," he said, and meant it. "We'll put it on the fridge when we get home." "Next to the other 50? Ella grinned, revealing the gap where she'd lost a tooth last week. "Next to the other 50, Jack confirmed. He glanced at his watch, an old Timex with a cracked crystal that he refused to replace, and saw it was just past 8. "2 more hours, okay? Then we'll stop for ice cream on the way home, your choice of flavor." Ella's eyes widened. "Even the chocolate peanut butter cookie one?" "Even that monstrosity," Jack said, making her giggle. "But you have to stay right here, got it? Don't wander, and if anyone bothers you—" "Find you immediately," Ella recited, having heard this instruction 100 times before. "I know, Daddy, I'm not a baby." "No," Jack agreed, standing and ruffling her dark hair, Sarah's hair, same color, same texture. "You're not. You're my brave girl." He returned to his mop bucket, resuming the slow, methodical circuit around the ballroom's perimeter. Most of the guests didn't even register his presence. Those who did treated him with the casual dismissiveness reserved for service workers. a cleared throat when he needed to mop near their shoes, an annoyed glance if his bucket came too close to their designer handbags. But Jack had learned long ago not to take it personally. These people weren't cruel, not really. They were just insulated, wrapped in layers of wealth and privilege so thick that they'd forgotten how to see beyond their own reflection. To them, he was a function, not a person. The man who made sure their champagne flutes didn't stick to the marble, who removed the inevitable spills and tracked in debris that even the wealthy couldn't avoid. What none of them knew, what Jack had spent 12 years and countless therapy sessions trying to forget, was that invisibility had once been his greatest weapon. The silver ring on his left hand caught the chandelier light as he worked, spinning slightly with each twist of the mop handle. It looked like a wedding band, and Jack let people assume that's what it was. Easier than explaining the truth, that the ring was tungsten carbide, nearly indestructible, and that the inscription on the inside, Ghost 6 Omnia, was written in a military code that only about 30 people in the world could read. Commander Jack Turner, call sign Ghost, leader of Special Operations Task Force 6, presumed dead after a classified mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains went catastrophically wrong 12 years ago. Official records showed a helicopter crash, no survivors, bodies never recovered. The military held a memorial service. His name went on a wall at Fort Bragg. His mother received a folded flag and a 3-volley salute. And then Jack Turner, the soldier, had died in every way that mattered, buried beneath paperwork, false identities, and the kind of bureaucratic erasure that made it seem like he'd never existed at all. The man who walked away from that mountain, the one who'd spent 6 weeks evading enemy patrols, surviving on melted snow and raw determination, wasn't a commander anymore. He was just Jack, civilian, widower, single father trying to give his daughter a normal life. The ring stayed on his finger, not because he couldn't let go of who he'd been, but because it reminded him why he'd chosen to disappear. Every man on his team had made it out of those mountains alive, 0 casualties. That was the Ghost reputation. Impossible missions, perfect records, everyone comes home. And when the operation was over, when the medals were quietly filed in folders marked above top secret, Jack had been given a choice. Come back to the life. Take a desk job, train the next generation, become one of those haunted-eyed veterans who drank too much at the officers' club and told war stories that nobody wanted to hear, or disappear. Take a new identity, a civilian life, and never look back. He'd met Sarah 2 months after choosing door number 2. She was a kindergarten teacher with a laugh that could light up a room and absolutely 0 interest in his mysterious past. She'd made it clear on their 3rd date that whatever he'd done before they met didn't matter as long as he was good to her and any kids they might have. Ella was born a year later, perfect and screaming, and so tiny that Jack had been terrified to hold her. And for 8 beautiful years, he'd been just a man, a husband, a father, someone who went to parent-teacher conferences and coached Little League and forgot, sometimes for weeks at a time, that he'd ever been anyone else. Then Sarah got sick, and the world reminded him that some enemies couldn't be defeated with training and tactics. The cancer took 18 months to kill her, each day a little harder than the last. By the end, Sarah weighed 83 pounds and couldn't remember Ella's name, but she'd held Jack's hand and made him promise, "Take care of our girl. Give her a normal life. Don't let your past become her prison." So Jack Turner mopped floors and fixed plumbing and took whatever jobs would let him bring Ella along when she wasn't in school. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood where the sirens sang you to sleep, and the bodega on the corner charged $3 for milk. It wasn't much. It wasn't what Sarah deserved or what Ella should have grown up with. But it was normal. It was safe. And Jack would burn the world down before he'd let anyone take that away from his daughter. "Excuse me. Hey! Hey!" The voice cut through Jack's thoughts like a serrated blade. He looked up to find a man in his early 50s standing 3 feet away, face flushed with the kind of red that came from too much champagne and too little self-awareness. The man wore a suit that probably cost $8,000 and a watch that cost $50. His name tag, because even at exclusive events, some people needed labels, identified him as Gregory Halston, CFO of Halston Dreyfus Capital Management. "Yeah?" Jack said mildly, stopping his mopping. "This floor right here." Halston pointed to a spot near his gleaming Oxford shoes. I spilled some champagne. Clean it up. It wasn't a request. The tone made that clear, the casual expectation that Jack would simply obey, that his entire purpose for existing at this moment was to address this minor inconvenience in Halston's otherwise perfect evening. Jack looked at the spot. There was no champagne. The marble gleamed, spotless, reflecting the chandelier light like still water. "Don't see any spill, sir," Jack said, keeping his voice neutral. Halston's flush deepened. "Are you arguing with me? I said I spilled champagne. Right here." He tapped his foot on the immaculate marble. "So get down there and clean it." A small crowd had started to gather, drawn by the confrontation the way people are always drawn to minor disasters. Jack could feel their eyes on him, some amused, some curious, none particularly sympathetic. This was entertainment for them, a tiny bit of drama to spice up their evening of networking and deal-making. "There's no spill, sir," Jack repeated. "But if you'd like, I can mop the area anyway." "Damn right you'll mop it." Halston's hand shot out, grabbing the champagne flute from a nearby table, someone else's glass, half full of golden liquid. "Matter of fact, let me help you find the spill." What happened next unfolded in slow motion, one of those moments where time stretches and compresses simultaneously, where you see exactly what's coming but can't quite believe it will actually happen. Halston raised the champagne flute and poured. The liquid splashed across Jack's chest, soaking through his work shirt, dripping down onto his pants and boots. The scent of expensive alcohol filled the air, something French, something that cost more per bottle than Jack earned in a week. The crowd's reaction rippled through the ballroom like a wave. Some gasped. Others laughed. Not cruel laughter exactly, but the nervous tittering of people who aren't sure if what they're witnessing is outrageous or hilarious. One woman actually pulled out her phone to record, no doubt imagining the viral potential of entitled rich guy humiliates worker. Jack stood perfectly still, champagne dripping from his clothes, his face showing absolutely nothing. Years of training had taught him to control his reactions, to present whatever expression the situation required. Right now, the situation required him to be nobody, just a janitor who'd been put in his place, someone so far beneath notice that humiliating him wasn't even worth commenting on. But inside, in the part of himself that Jack had spent 12 years trying to bury, something stirred. Old instincts, old training. The ghost, recognizing a target, calculating responses, cataloging the 17 different ways he could put Halston on the ground before the man's champagne-soaked brain registered movement. Jack did none of those things. Instead, he reached for his mop, wrung it out carefully in the bucket, and began cleaning the champagne that was now, technically, actually on the floor. "That's better," Halston said, his voice loud enough to carry across the nearby tables. "See, this is what's wrong with the working class today. No respect for the people who create jobs, who drive the economy. You want $15 an hour? Earn it. Show some goddamn gratitude for the opportunity to work in a place like this." The speech was clearly for the crowd, performing outrage for an audience that would either applaud or remain silent, which in these circles amounted to the same thing. And most of them did remain silent, turning back to their conversations, the entertainment over, the invisible man properly reminded of his place. But not everyone looked away. In her alcove, hidden from most of the crowd's view, Ella had witnessed everything. Her coloring book lay forgotten in her lap, crayons scattered. Her dark eyes, Sarah's eyes, wide with the kind of hurt that only children feel when they see someone they love being treated as less than human. Jack caught her gaze, saw the tears starting to form, and gave the tiniest shake of his head. "Not now," the gesture said. "I'm okay. We're okay." But they both knew it was a lie. "Hey, Halston," someone called from near the bar, mercifully changing the subject. "Tell us about that resort development in Aruba. I heard the environmental board finally approved the permits?" The CFO's attention shifted, drawn to the prospect of talking about his achievements, and just like that, Jack Turner ceased to exist again. He finished mopping the champagne, every drop methodically, because doing a half-assed job wasn't in his nature, then moved his bucket back toward the service entrance. When he reached the alcove, Ella was standing, her small fists clenched at her sides. "That man is mean," she whispered fiercely. "You should tell someone. You should—" "I should finish my job," Jack interrupted gently, kneeling to be at her eye level. And then we should get ice cream, remember? Chocolate peanut butter cookie monstrosity? But Daddy, baby girl, listen to me. Jack took her hands in his, still damp from the mop water. Do you remember what your mom used to say? About words? Ella's lip trembled, but she nodded. Words are just sounds. They can't hurt us unless we let them. That's right. That man... Jack gestured vaguely toward where Halston held court, surrounded by laughing executives. He's just making sounds. He doesn't know me. He doesn't know you. And he definitely doesn't know that right here, right now, we've got something he'll never have. What's that? Each other. Jack tapped her nose, making her almost smile. His words don't define us, Ella. Our actions do. Our choices. How we treat people when nobody's watching. That man might have money and fancy suits and champagne that costs more than our rent, but you know what he doesn't have? What? A daughter who draws pictures of stars because she knows her dad likes them. That did it. Ella's almost smile became real, genuine, lighting up her face the way Sarah's used to light up. She threw her arms around Jack's neck, squeezing tight enough that he felt the air rush out of his lungs. I love you, Daddy, she whispered into his shoulder. Love you too, baby girl. Always. He held her for a moment longer, then gently disentangled himself and stood. 2 more hours, okay? Stay here, stay safe, and then we're gone. Can you do that for me? Ella nodded, settling back onto her bench and reaching for her coloring book with renewed determination. I'm going to draw that mean man falling in a puddle, she announced. That's my girl, Jack said, and meant it. He returned to his circuit around the ballroom, hyper-aware now of the eyes that didn't quite look at him, the conversations that paused as he passed by. Someone had spilled actual champagne near the orchestra platform, a legitimate accident this time, and Jack set to work cleaning it while the string quartet played something complicated and beautiful. But even as he worked, even as he maintained his carefully constructed invisibility, part of Jack's mind was elsewhere. Old training dies hard, and there were habits, threat assessment, pattern recognition, situational awareness that you never really lost no matter how many years you spent trying to be normal. And something was wrong. It started as nothing more than a feeling, that primitive instinct that evolution hardwired into humans back when being stalked by predators was a daily concern. The sensation of being watched, not casually but intently, the way a predator watches prey before striking. Jack straightened from his mopping and scanned the ballroom, his eyes moving in the practiced pattern he'd learned during advanced reconnaissance training. Near to far, left to right, high to low, cataloging faces and body language and anything that didn't fit the expected pattern. There. 3 men standing near the northern entrance, approximately 70 feet from Jack's current position. They wore suits, black, well-tailored but not ostentatious, the kind of clothing designed to blend in at an upscale event without drawing attention. To most observers, they would have looked like just 3 more guests, perhaps lawyers or accountants, the kind of support personnel that wealthy people brought to business parties. But Jack saw what others missed, the way they stood, weight balanced on the balls of their feet, ready to move. The way their eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and potential threats. The way their suit jackets hung slightly wrong on the left side, weighted down by something heavy and concealed. The way they moved, not walking exactly, but flowing through space with the kind of economy of motion that came from years of tactical training. These weren't lawyers, these weren't accountants, these were operators. Jack's pulse didn't spike. Another old habit, the ability to maintain physiological calm while his mind raced through calculations and probabilities. He resumed mopping, his movements unchanged, giving no indication that he'd noticed anything unusual. But he noticed everything. The 3 men separated, spreading out around the ballroom's perimeter in a pattern Jack recognized from his own training, establishing overlapping fields of observation, ensuring that no blind spots existed, creating a formation that would allow rapid convergence on a central target. And their eyes, for just a moment, had locked onto Isabella Lane. Jack's grip tightened on the mop handle. This wasn't his problem. He wasn't that man anymore. He was a janitor, a nobody, a single father whose entire purpose was taking care of his daughter. Whatever was about to happen in this ballroom, whatever those 3 men were planning, it had nothing to do with him. Except except that in the alcove behind him, Ella was coloring pictures of stars, except that if violence erupted in this ballroom, if shots were fired or panic ensued, his daughter would be right in the middle of it. Except that 12 years ago, Jack Turner had made a promise to his team: everyone comes home. And some promises he was learning never really expired. The ballroom's energy shifted as the mayor took the stage, tapping a microphone to call for attention. The conversations quieted, champagne flutes paused halfway to lips, and 372 of the city's elite turned their attention to the dais where Isabella Lane was being called up for her grand announcement. She moved through the crowd like a swan, graceful, composed, giving no indication of the fear that Jack now recognized in the tightness of her shoulders, the too frequent glances toward the exits. Whatever threat she'd received, whatever made her hire the extra security that Jack had clocked earlier, she clearly knew something was wrong. And the three men in black suits were closing in. Jack calculated distances, angles, response times. The nearest uniformed security guard was 40 feet away, engaged in conversation with a waiter. The plainclothes officers he'd identified earlier, probably private security, competent but not special forces level, were clustered near the eastern entrance, too far away to react quickly. If those three men made their move, if they had weapons, and Jack was 90% certain they did, they could reach Isabella Lane in approximately 8 seconds. 8 seconds. A lifetime in combat. An eye blink in civilian life. Jack looked back at Ella. She was absorbed in her coloring, lost in a world where the worst thing that could happen was running out of purple crayon. Safe. Happy. Normal. Everything Sarah had made him promise to give her. The mayor's voice boomed through the sound system. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my profound pleasure to introduce a woman who needs no introduction. Jack made his decision. He moved his mop bucket to a position that gave him a clear line of sight to all three men, maintaining his janitor persona, but adjusting his stance fractionally, weight-balanced, ready to explode into motion if necessary. His mind, unused for so long except to calculate grocery budgets and homework deadlines, slipped back into tactical mode with frightening ease at Target 1, Sepasen, 6 feet, approximately 190 pounds, favoring his left side, and old injury, maybe a bad knee. Weapon bulge left hip, likely a compact semi-automatic. 17 feet away. Target 2, 5'11", heavily muscled, moving with the confidence of someone who'd seen real action. Weapon bulge, right hip, cross-draw setup, probably left-hand dominant. 23 feet away. Target 3, 6'2", lean, eyes like a shark's, flat, emotionless, already calculating casualties. Weapon bulge small of back, plus something in an ankle holster. This one was the leader, Jack knew instinctively. This was the one who'd pulled the trigger before and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. 31 feet away. Isabella Lane reached the stage, her heels clicking on marble, her smile bright and false. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for being here tonight. Target 3's hand moved toward his back. Everything slowed down. Jack's training screamed at him to move, to intercept, to eliminate the threat before it could manifest. His civilian life screamed louder, reminding him of the sleeping little girl in the alcove, the promise he'd made to Sarah, the normal life that would shatter irreparably the moment he revealed what he really was. Target 3's hand continued its journey toward the weapon Jack knew was waiting there. The crowd applauded something Isabella said. Jack had stopped listening to words, focused entirely on motion and intent. Target 3's fingers touched fabric, and then the ballroom's grand doors, the massive oak and brass affairs that had cost Sterling Enterprises $500,000 and were usually opened only for the most prestigious arrivals, burst open with a force that made the chandeliers shake. The music stopped. The applause died. 372 people turned to stare. 3 men in black suits stood in the doorway, and Jack's blood ran cold. Because these weren't the 3 men he'd been tracking. These were different, but similar. Same stance, same predatory awareness, same weapons bulge in the same places. And they'd just made an entrance designed to draw every eye in the room, creating chaos and distraction. A diversion. Jack's head snapped back to the 3 men he'd been watching. They were moving now, no longer bothering with subtlety, converging on Isabella Lane with the synchronized precision of a well-trained team. The crowd's attention was still on the dramatic entrance, and in that moment of confusion, the three men advanced on their target. Target 3, the shark-eyed leader, was fastest, reaching the stage in 4 long strides. His hand came out from behind his back, holding exactly what Jack expected. A Sig Sauer P229, compact but deadly, the kind of weapon professionals favored for close-quarters work. "Nobody move!" The voice cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Target 3 had the SIG pointed at Isabella Lane's head, his other hand gripping her arm with the kind of force that would leave bruises. "This doesn't concern any of you. We just want her." The crowd erupted. Screams, gasps, the sound of champagne flutes hitting marble and shattering. People scattered, pressing toward the exits, creating exactly the kind of panic that made tactical responses nearly impossible. The 3 men from the doorway moved into the room, weapons now openly visible, establishing a perimeter that herded the panicking crowd away from their colleagues on the stage. 6 men, 6 weapons, 1 hostage, approximately 250 civilians in immediate danger, plus another 122 who would be caught in crossfire if someone started shooting. The math was simple and terrible. Jack looked at his daughter. Ella had dropped her coloring book, her face pale with terror, her eyes finding his across the chaos. She started to stand, to run to him, and Jack made a gesture that she'd never seen before, one hand flat, palm down, pressing toward the floor. "Stay down. Stay hidden. Don't move." Ella's eyes went wide, but she obeyed, dropping behind the bench, making herself as small as possible. "Good girl." Jack turned back to the stage, his mind calculating possibilities and probabilities at a speed that would have impressed his old tactical instructors. 6 men, professional, coordinated, which meant they'd trained together, trusted each other. The 3 at the door were there to control the crowd and prevent interference. The 3 on stage, targets 1, 2, and 3, were the primary team, focused entirely on Isabella Lane. Who was these men really? What did they want? The obvious answer was ransom. Isabella Lane was worth billions, and kidnapping CEOs was a growth industry for organized crime. But something about this felt wrong, too coordinated, too military. These weren't mob enforcers or desperate criminals. These were operators with a mission, which made them significantly more dangerous. "Please," Isabella's voice carried across the ballroom, remarkably steady despite the gun pressed to her temple. "Whatever this is about, we can negotiate. I have money. I have resources. Just tell me what you want." Target 3, the leader, actually smiled, though the expression held no warmth. "Oh, we know what you have, Miss Lane. We know exactly what you took from our employer, and now it's time to pay what you owe." "I don't, Isabella started. "The Prometheus file," Target 3 interrupted. "Don't insult us by pretending ignorance. You stole classified research, weaponized it for corporate profit, and thought you could hide behind lawyers and NDAs. Our employer has been very patient, but patience has limits." Jack's tactical assessment shifted. This wasn't a simple kidnapping. This was corporate espionage, industrial sabotage, the kind of shadow war that happened in boardrooms and black sites, where lives were just another line item on a balance sheet. Which meant these men weren't here to take Isabella Lane alive. They were here to make an example. Target 3's finger moved to the trigger, and Jack Turner, janitor, nobody, invisible man, made a choice that would change everything. He moved. 12 years of carefully constructed invisibility shattered in the space between heartbeats. Jack's first 3 steps were pure muscle memory, his body remembering what his conscious mind had tried to forget. The mop handle dropped from his hands with a clatter that nobody heard over the screaming, and his right hand moved to his hip, in a motion that would have drawn a weapon if he'd been carrying one. He wasn't, of course, hadn't carried a firearm since the day he'd walked away from Fort Bragg with a discharge certificate and a new identity, but his body didn't know that yet. The distance between Jack and the stage was 47 feet. At a full sprint, accounting for the crowd and obstacles, he could cover it in approximately 4 seconds. Target 3's finger was already on the trigger, applying pressure, maybe half a second from firing. 4 seconds. Half a second. The math didn't work. So Jack did something that went against every tactical instinct he possessed. He opened his mouth and made himself the most visible person in the room. "Federal agent!" His voice cut through the chaos like a blade, carrying the kind of command authority that made people's spines straighten reflexively. "Drop the weapon! Now!" It was a complete lie, of course. Jack Turner had no federal credentials, no badge, no legal authority whatsoever. But he'd learned a long time ago that in moments of chaos, confidence mattered more than credentials. If you sounded like you belonged, if you moved like you had every right to be giving orders, most people, even trained operators, would hesitate for just a second while their brains processed the new information. That second was all Jack needed. Target 3's head snapped toward him, the SIG wavering fractionally away from Isabella's temple as the man's training warred with his surprise. Professional operators didn't panic, but they did reassess when new threats emerged. Jack saw the calculation happening behind those shark eyes. Who was this person? What agency did he represent? What level of threat did he pose? In that fraction of a second, while Target 3 was still processing, Jack closed another 15 feet. "I said drop it!" Jack's hand was in his pocket now, gripping his cell phone and holding it forward like it was a weapon, his body language screaming law enforcement. "You're surrounded! There are 20 agents in this building. Stand down!" More lies, each one buying him precious fractions of seconds. The 3 men at the door were turning now, weapons swinging toward this new threat, trying to acquire a target while also processing whether they'd somehow missed an entire federal response team. Target 2, the heavily muscled one with the cross-draw setup, raised his weapon toward Jack, and time did that thing it always did in combat, stretching and compressing simultaneously. Jack saw the man's finger tighten on the trigger, saw the minute adjustment of the barrel tracking towards center mass, and his body reacted before his mind could overthink it. He dove left, tucking into a roll that carried him behind a marble pillar just as the first shot rang out. The sound was massive in the enclosed space, echoing off the high ceiling and making several people in the crowd faint. Jack came out of the roll in a crouch, his heart hammering but his breathing steady, adrenaline flooding his system but not overwhelming his training. "Shots fired," he shouted, maintaining the fiction of federal authority. "All units converge. I want this building locked down." Target 1, the one with the bad knee, was moving toward him now, weapon raised, no longer bothering with the pretense of a clean extraction. The mission had gone loud, which meant collateral damage was now acceptable. Jack saw it in the man's eyes, the shift from professional to desperate. Desperate men made mistakes. Target 1 came around the pillar fast, leading with his weapon, and Jack was waiting. His left hand shot out, grabbing the man's wrist and redirecting the Glock's barrel toward the ceiling, even as his right hand came up in a palm strike that caught Target 1 square in the throat. Not hard enough to kill, Jack still had enough control for that, but hard enough to make breathing an immediate priority over shooting. Target 1 stumbled back, gagging, and Jack stripped the Glock from his hand with a wrist twist that his old hand-to-hand combat instructor would have called textbook. The weapon felt foreign and familiar all at once, heavier than Jack remembered, or maybe he'd just spent too long holding mops instead of firearms. "FBI!" Jack shouted again, still selling the lie, using the pillar for cover as he assessed the situation. "Drop your weapons or I will drop you." The ballroom had transformed into a nightmare. Civilians were pressed against the walls, some crying, others filming on their phones despite the danger. The 3 men at the door had taken defensive positions, creating a crossfire kill zone that would cut down anyone trying to rush them. On stage, Target 3 still had Isabella Lane in his grip, though the SIG was now pointed at Jack instead of her temple. And in the alcove, hidden behind her bench but definitely not safe, Ella was watching her father hold a gun for the first time in her life. Jack's heart lurched. Everything he'd promised Sarah, every carefully constructed piece of their normal life was crumbling in real time. After tonight, there would be questions. From the police, from the media, from everyone. His cover was blown. His past was about to become very, very present. But that was a problem for later. Right now, keeping Ella and everyone else alive was the only thing that mattered. "You're not FBI," Target 3 called out, his voice carrying across the ballroom with unsettling calm. Voice print is wrong. Body language is military, not federal. Special forces, if I had to guess. Which means you're either very brave or very stupid, because you just brought a pistol to a 6-on-1 fight. Math was never my strong suit, Jack replied, keeping his voice light despite the situation. Humor diffused tension, created cognitive dissonance, made opponents hesitate. But I'm pretty good at counting exits. You've got 2 ways out of this building, both of which are about to be crawling with actual police. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to release Ms. Lane, drop your weapons and walk out of here with your hands up. Do that, and everyone goes home. Target 3 actually laughed. You're bluffing. If there were really federal agents here, they'd have already breached. You're alone, 1 man with 1 gun against 6 of us. He pressed the cig harder against Isabella's head, making her wince. So here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to drop that weapon, step out from behind your pillar, and let us leave with Ms. Lane. Do that, and maybe we don't start executing hostages. Jack's mind raced through scenarios, each one worse than the last. In a perfect world, with his old team, with proper equipment and planning time, this would have been a manageable situation. But this wasn't a perfect world. This was a billionaire's party gone wrong, with civilians everywhere and his daughter watching from the shadows. The Glock in his hand held 17 rounds, 6 targets. If he was still at his peak, if his reflexes were what they used to be, if he hadn't spent 12 years getting soft, he might be able to take 3 of them before return fire forced him back into cover. But that would leave 3 armed men in a room full of unarmed civilians, and the body count would be catastrophic. There had to be another way. "Let me tell you a story," Jack called out, his voice conversational, buying time while his tactical mind worked through possibilities. 12 years ago, there was a team, special operators, the best of the best. They got sent on an impossible mission in the Hindu Kush Mountains. Intelligence said it was a suicide run, 0 chance of success, minimal chance of survival. He paused, adjusting his position slightly, checking angles. Target 2 was moving left, trying to flank his position. Jack tracked him peripherally while keeping most of his attention on Target 3. But the team had a leader, Jack continued. A commander with a reputation for impossible rescues and 0 casualties. They called him Ghost because he could walk through enemy territory like he wasn't there. Invisible. Untouchable. "Fascinating history lesson," Target 3 said dryly, but irrelevant to our current situation. "See, that's where you're wrong." Jack's voice hardened, losing the conversational tone. "Because that team, they all made it home. Every single operator walked off that mountain alive. And you want to know how?" He didn't wait for an answer. The Ghost made a deal with himself, a promise. Everyone comes home. Not most people, not the lucky ones. Everyone. And he kept that promise through 17 missions, across 4 continents, against odds that should have been impossible. Jack stepped out from behind the pillar, the Glock held in a 2-handed grip, aimed directly at Target 3's head. His stance was textbook Weaver, weight balanced, breathing controlled, every inch of him radiating the kind of confidence that came from having done this 1,000 times before. "So here's the thing," he said quietly. "I made a promise a long time ago that everyone comes home, and I intend to keep it. That includes Ms. Lane. That includes every person in this room. And here's the really interesting part. It includes you 6 idiots, too." The ballroom had gone completely silent. Even the crying had stopped as everyone strained to hear what would happen next. "That's your offer?" Target 3's voice was incredulous. "You're going to save us? The people actively trying to kill your hostage?" "I'm going to give you a choice," Jack corrected. "Door number 1, you try to shoot your way out. Maybe you kill Miss Lane, maybe you kill me, maybe you kill a dozen civilians before the actual police arrive and gun you down like dogs. You definitely don't make it out of this building alive. That's door number 1. His eyes locked onto Target 3's, and something passed between them. A recognition, operator to operator, of exactly what Jack was offering. Door number 2, you release Ms. Lane, you drop your weapons, and you walk out of here with your hands up. You go to trial, probably federal court. With good lawyers and the right plea deal, you're looking at maybe 10 years, out in 7 with good behavior. You get to live, your families get to visit you, and someday you get to go home. Jack's voice dropped lower, intimate, like he was sharing a secret. I know which door I'd choose. But then again, I'm the guy who walked through the Hindu Kush and brought everyone home. What are you? The silence stretched. Jack could see the calculation happening in Target Three's eyes, could see the man weighing odds and outcomes. Professional operators were ultimately pragmatists. They understood risk assessment better than anyone. And right now, the risk assessment was clear. Continuing this mission meant certain death. "Who are you?" Target 3 asked quietly. "Really?" Jack's lips quirked in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Just a janitor trying to get his daughter home for ice cream. But I used to be someone else, someone who never broke a promise." He could see it happening, see the moment Target 3 made his decision. The man's grip on Isabella loosened fractionally, his weapon lowering millimeters. Not a surrender yet, but the beginning of one. And then everything went to hell. One of the men at the door, younger than the others, less experienced, more afraid, panicked. His weapon swung toward a cluster of civilians trying to inch toward the exit, his finger tightening on the trigger in a fear response that any decent trainer would have beaten out of him months ago. Jack saw it happening, saw the trajectory, saw where the bullet would go, straight into a group that included the mayor, 2 senators, and his heart stopped. 3 children who'd been brought by their parents to the fancy party. He didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't assess. He just moved. The Glock came up, his finger already on the trigger, his aim already perfect despite 12 years of rust. The shot was impossible, a moving target at 43 feet in a room full of civilians with margins of error measured in millimeters. But Jack took it anyway because impossible was where the ghost lived. The round caught the panicking gunman in the shoulder, spinning him away from the civilians, his weapon clattering to the marble floor. Not a kill shot, Jack still had enough control for that, but enough to neutralize the immediate threat. The sound of the gunshot shattered whatever fragile peace had been forming. The other 2 door guards opened fire, their rounds chewing into the marble pillar Jack had been standing behind moments before. Target 2, the muscular cross-draw specialist, rushed Jack's position while he was exposed. Target 1, recovered from the throat strike, was retrieving his dropped weapon. And on stage, Target 3's calculation had changed. Whatever window for peaceful surrender had existed was gone now, burned away by gunfire and chaos. He pressed the SIG back against Isabella's head, his voice cutting through the noise. "Everyone stops or she dies!" Jack had already dropped into a slide, his work pants providing just enough friction against the marble to control his momentum while also making him a harder target. Target 2's shots went high, punching holes in a priceless tapestry that some Renaissance artist had spent years creating. Jack came out of the slide in a crouch, squeezed the trigger twice, double tap, center mass, exactly the way he'd been trained. And Target 2 went down hard. Not dead, Jack knew instinctively. The Glock's rounds had caught him in the ballistic plate that professional operators always wore. Hurt like hell, probably cracked ribs, definitely out of the fight, but alive. Everyone comes home. "I said stop!" Target 3's voice was nearly a scream now. "I will kill her!" Jack froze, his weapon still raised, every tactical instinct screaming at him to take the shot. Target 3's head was exposed, just enough of it visible beside Isabella's that a perfect marksman could theoretically make the shot. But Jack hadn't fired a weapon in 12 years, and theoretically wasn't good enough when a hostage's life was on the line. "Okay," Jack said, his voice calm despite his racing heart. "Okay, I'm stopping. See?" He raised his hand slowly, the Glock pointing at the ceiling. "Everyone just take a breath." The ballroom was a war zone. The younger gunman Jack had shot was screaming, clutching his shoulder, his blood making abstract patterns on the white marble. Target 2 was groaning, trying to crawl toward his dropped weapon. The other door guards had taken cover behind overturned tables, their weapons trained on Jack, but their fingers thankfully off the triggers for the moment. And in the alcove, Jack caught a glimpse of Ella's face, pale and terrified, her eyes wide with the kind of horror that no 9-year-old should ever witness. "I'm sorry, baby girl," Jack thought. "I'm so sorry." "Drop it," Target 3 ordered. "Drop the weapon or I blow her brains all over this stage." Jack's mind raced through scenarios at light speed. Drop the weapon, and he had no leverage, no way to prevent whatever came next. Keep the weapon, and Isabella Lane died in the next 3 seconds. There had to be a third option, some tactical solution he was missing, some way to... The door behind Target 3. The service entrance that led backstage, the one that performers used during events, burst open with explosive force. Richard Moss, Isabella's head of security, came through like an avalanche in an Armani suit. The former Secret Service agent moved with the kind of speed that made mockery of his 63 years. His service weapon, a Sig Sauer P226, Jack noted automatically, already tracking toward Target 3. Security! Release her now! Target 3's head snapped toward this new threat, his weapon swinging away from Isabella's temple for just a fraction of a second, and Jack took the shot he'd been setting up. Not at Target 3, at the Sig Sauer in his hand. The round caught the weapon's slide, the impact shearing metal and sending the handgun spinning away from Target 3's suddenly numb fingers. It was a trick shot, the kind of thing that worked in movies and almost never in real life. The kind of thing Jack shouldn't have been able to make after 12 years away from active duty. But some skills apparently never really went away. Isabella didn't hesitate. The moment the gun left her attacker's hand, she drove her elbow backward into Target 3's solar plexus with enough force to make him double over, then brought her designer heel down on his instep hard enough that something crunched audibly. She'd clearly taken self-defense classes at some point, and muscle memory was a beautiful thing. Moss was there instantly, his weapon trained on Target 3 while his free hand pulled Isabella to safety. 2 more security guards burst through the service entrance, weapons drawn, finally, providing the backup that should have been there from the beginning. "Federal agents, nobody move!" This time, the voice at the ballroom's main entrance was real. 6 FBI agents in tactical gear poured through the doors, their weapons and body language marking them as hostage rescue team, the Bureau's elite counterterrorism unit. They moved like water, flowing through the space with practiced efficiency, securing the wounded gunmen, establishing a perimeter, shouting commands that echoed off the high ceiling. Jack slowly, carefully, set the Glock on the floor and stepped away from it, his hands raised. The last thing he needed was to get shot by friendly fire because some HRT operator mistook him for a hostile. "On the ground! Everyone on the ground!" The command wasn't directed at anyone specific, just a standard crowd control measure, but Jack complied immediately. He dropped to his knees, then to his stomach, hands behind his head, fingers interlaced. It was a position he'd been in before, during training exercises, though never as a civilian caught in the middle of a hostage situation. Around him, the ballroom descended into controlled chaos. The FBI agents were securing the scene, separating witnesses, calling for paramedics. The wounded gunmen were being cuffed and read their rights. Isabella Lane was being led to safety, wrapped in a blanket despite the room's warmth, shock finally setting in now that the immediate danger had passed. And through it all, Jack kept his face pressed against the marble, his mind already racing ahead to what came next. Questions, interrogations, background checks. His carefully constructed civilian identity was about to be peeled away like old paint, revealing the soldier underneath. "Clear! Clear! All hostiles secured." The HRT team leader, a woman in her 40s with gray threading through her tactical bun, approached Jack's prone form with her weapon lowered but ready. "Sir, I need you to stay very still and answer my questions clearly. Do you understand?" "Yes, ma'am," Jack replied, his voice muffled against the floor. "Are you injured?" "No, ma'am." "Are you armed with any other weapons?" "No, ma'am." "Cell phone in my right pocket, wallet in my left. Nothing else." "Can you tell me your name?" Jack hesitated for just a fraction of a second. This was it, the moment where his old life and new life collided irrevocably. "Jack Turner." "Mr. Turner, I'm Special Agent Sandra Reeves, FBI Hostage Rescue Team. I need you to remain still while my team secures the scene. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, ma'am." But even as he agreed, even as he lay motionless while federal agents moved around him like sharks around chum, Jack's eyes were searching the ballroom for the only thing that really mattered. Where was Ella? The alcove was blocked from his view by an overturned table and a cluster of FBI agents. He couldn't see her, couldn't verify that she was safe, and the not knowing was worse than any firefight he'd ever been in. "Agent Reeves," Jack said, fighting to keep his voice calm, "my daughter was in the alcove near the service entrance. 9 years old, dark hair, pink jacket. I need to know she's okay." Something shifted in Reeves' expression, the professional mask slipping for just a moment to reveal the human underneath. "Hold on." She keyed her radio. "This is Reeves. Anyone have eyes on a juvenile female, approximately 9 years old, pink jacket, last seen near the southeast alcove?" Static crackled. Then a male voice responded, This is Chen. I've got her. She's scared but uninjured, asking for her father. The relief that flooded through Jack was so intense it made him dizzy. Thank you, he breathed. Reeves studied him for a long moment, her tactical mind clearly working through the same assessment Jack had made about the gunman earlier. Threat or non-threat, trained or lucky, professional or civilian. Mr. Turner, she said quietly, I've been doing this job for 17 years. I've seen a lot of shootings, a lot of hostage situations, and what you did in here, she paused, choosing her words carefully. That wasn't luck. That wasn't civilian panic. That was professional-grade tactical response. So before we go any further, before my team starts digging into your background and we all discover things that maybe you'd rather keep quiet, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I'd appreciate an honest answer. Jack met her eyes, seeing his own past reflected in her assessment. Who are you, really? The ballroom had gone quiet around them, the initial chaos giving way to the methodical process of crime scene investigation. Photographers were documenting bullet impacts. Evidence techs were collecting shell casings. Witnesses were being separated and assigned to interview teams. And somewhere in all that activity, a 9-year-old girl was waiting for her father. I'm a janitor, Jack said finally. That's who I am now. That's who I've been for 12 years. But before that, he took a breath. Before that, I was someone else. Someone who made promises about bringing people home. And old promises die hard. Reeves nodded slowly, as if he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. We're going to need a full statement. Your background is going to get run through every database the Bureau has access to. If there's anything in your past that's going to complicate this situation, now would be the time to mention it. There's a lot in my past, Jack admitted. Most of it classified above your pay grade. No offense intended, but I'm guessing your background check is going to hit a wall pretty quick. When it does, someone's going to make a phone call to Fort Bragg. And then someone at Bragg is going to make a phone call to somewhere in Virginia that doesn't officially exist. And then things are going to get very complicated very quickly. He could see her processing that information. See the moment she realized that Jack Turner was more than just a lucky civilian. Department of Defense? She asked carefully. Once upon a time, Jack confirmed. Different life, different name, technically. But the man I was then made sure the man I am now could exist without interference. There are protections in place, protocols. I'm not supposed to be findable. Reeves whistled softly. Witness protection? Something like that, but weirder. Jack shifted slightly, his arms starting to cramp from the position. Look, I know this is your scene and I'm cooperating fully, but my daughter just watched me shoot someone. She's 9 years old. She thinks I'm a janitor who tells bad jokes and makes pancakes on weekends. And right now she's scared and confused and probably thinks her whole world is falling apart. So whatever questions you have, whatever procedures need to be followed, I'm asking you, parent to parent if you have kids, human to human if you don't, please let me see my daughter first. Something in his voice must have reached her because Reeves' expression softened fractionally. You saved a lot of lives tonight, Mr. Turner. However that happened, whatever you used to be, you kept a bad situation from becoming a massacre. That counts for something. She keyed her radio again. Chen, bring the girl to the southeast corner. Her father's here. Copy that. Reeves stood, offering Jack a hand up. He took it, rising to his feet and immediately spotting Ella being led through the crowd by a young FBI agent who looked barely old enough to shave. The moment she saw him, Ella broke into a run, and Jack caught her in his arms, lifting her off the ground and holding her so tightly he was probably crushing her but couldn't make himself let go. Daddy, you're okay. I thought, when the guns started, I thought... Ella was crying into his shoulder, her small body shaking with sobs she'd been holding back. I'm okay, baby girl. We're okay. It's over. Jack buried his face in her hair, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, and feeling his heart slowly remember how to beat normally. You had a gun, Ella whispered, so quietly that only he could hear. You shot those bad men, just like... She pulled back enough to look at his face, her eyes red-rimmed but sharp, seeing things no 9-year-old should have to see. Just like a soldier. Jack had spent 12 years preparing for this conversation, planning what he'd say, how he'd explain. But all those carefully rehearsed speeches disappeared in the face of his daughter's tear-stained face. "Yeah," he said simply, "just like a soldier. Because that's what I used to be, before you were born, before I met your mom. I was a soldier, and I did things that soldiers do. But then I met your mom, and we had you, and I stopped being a soldier and became a dad instead. Because being your dad is better than anything else I've ever been." "But you still remembered how," Ella said. It wasn't a question. "Some things you don't forget," Jack admitted, "like how to ride a bike or how to swim. Your body remembers even when you don't want it to." "Did you?" Ella swallowed hard. "Did you kill those men?" "No." Jack looked her straight in the eye, letting her see the truth. "I hurt them. I had to protect people. But they're alive. All of them. Because that's what I promised your mom a long time ago. That I'd protect people, but I'd never become someone who solved problems by ending lives. Not anymore. Not unless there was absolutely no other choice." Ella processed this for a long moment, her child's mind trying to reconcile the father she knew with the man she'd just seen in action. "The kids," she said finally. "The ones near the door. If you hadn't shot that man, he would have—" "Yeah," Jack confirmed quietly. "He would have." "So you protected them?" "I protected everyone I could." Ella's arms tightened around his neck. "Mommy would be proud of you," she whispered. "I'm proud of you too, even if I'm also really scared." Jack felt something break inside his chest. That careful compartmentalization he'd maintained for so many years finally cracking under the weight of his daughter's unconditional love. "I'm scared too, baby girl," he admitted. "But we're together, and we're safe, and that's what matters." "Mr. Turner?" Agent Reeves approached with the kind of careful body language people used around skittish animals. "I hate to interrupt, but we do need to get your statement while events are fresh. We've arranged for a family services counselor to stay with your daughter while we talk, unless you'd prefer to have her present." Jack looked at Ella, then back at Reeves. "How long?" "Couple hours, probably. Maybe longer, depending on what your background check reveals." "And if I refuse? If I just take my daughter and walk out?" Reeves's expression hardened slightly. "Then I'd have to detain you as a material witness. You discharged a firearm in a room full of civilians, Mr. Turner. Good intentions or not, that's something we need to fully document. You're not under arrest, not even close, but you're also not free to leave until we get a statement." Jack had expected as much. The FBI didn't let people walk away from shootings without a full investigation, no matter how justified the shooting might have been. And truthfully, he understood their position. From their perspective, he was an unknown variable in an extremely complex situation. "Okay," he said, "but Ella stays where I can see her. And the family services counselor better be someone with actual credentials, not just whoever you had on call. My daughter just lived through a traumatic event, and I'm not letting some bureaucrat make it worse." "Fair enough," Reeves agreed. "We've got a Dr. Patricia Morrison on site, child psychologist, works with the Bureau on cases involving juvenile witnesses. She's good at her job, Mr. Turner. I've seen her help kids through worse than this." Worse than watching your father in a gunfight, Jack thought, but didn't say. "Ella," he said, setting her down but keeping one hand on her shoulder. "I need to talk to these agents and tell them what happened. Dr. Morrison is going to stay with you while I do that, okay? You'll be able to see me the whole time. I'll be right over there." He pointed to a relatively undamaged section of the ballroom where FBI agents were setting up interview stations. "If you need me, if anything feels wrong, you tell Dr. Morrison and I'll come right away. Deal?" Ella nodded, though her hand clutched his tightly. "Promise you won't disappear?" The question hit Jack like a physical blow. How many nights had she woken up from nightmares about him leaving, about being abandoned the way Sarah's death had abandoned them both? "I promise," he said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere without you. Not tonight, not ever." Dr. Morrison appeared then, a black woman in her 50s with gentle eyes and the kind of calm presence that probably made traumatized children feel safe. She introduced herself to Ella with the perfect balance of friendliness and professionalism, offered her a tablet loaded with games and coloring apps, and guided her to a quiet corner with sightlines to where Jack would be interviewed. And then Jack Turner, janitor and father, sat down across from Special Agent Sandra Reeves and prepared to explain how a man who mopped floors for a living had just executed professional-grade tactical maneuvers against 6 armed hostiles. "Let's start at the beginning," Reeves said, pulling out a digital recorder. "Full name, address, current employment." Jack provided the basics. The sanitized version of his life that held up to casual scrutiny but wouldn't survive serious investigation. "Now," Reeves continued, "walk me through what happened tonight, from the moment you arrived at Sterling Tower." So Jack did. He described setting up his equipment, keeping Ella entertained in the alcove, the champagne incident with Gregory Halston. Reeves' expression flickered at that part, anger quickly suppressed, but she didn't interrupt. "Then I noticed 3 men," Jack continued. "Something about their movement pattern felt wrong, professional, tactical." "And you recognize tactical movement how exactly?" Reeves asked. "For a janitor?" "I watch a lot of action movies," Jack said dryly. "Jason Bourne marathons on the weekends." Reeves didn't smile. "Mr. Turner, we both know that's not an adequate explanation. Nobody picks up threat recognition from movies. So let's skip the part where you pretend to be an ordinary civilian who got lucky and move to the part where you explain how you knew those men were operators before they drew weapons." Jack held her gaze. "I can't. Can't or won't. Can't. Because if I tell you how I recognize tactical movement, I'll have to tell you where I learned about tactical movement. And that information is classified at a level that requires security clearances neither of us currently have in this room." Reeves sat back, studying him with the intensity of someone trying to read a book in a foreign language. "You know what I think?" she said finally. "I think you're former special operations. Probably Tier 1 based on the way you moved. The ghost comment, that was real, wasn't it? That wasn't just a story you made up to buy time." Jack said nothing, which was answer enough. "Here's my problem," Reeves continued. 6 men with weapons, trained coordination, inside information about Sterling Tower's layout and security protocols. That's not random. That's planned. Someone hired them, funded them, gave them intelligence. And then you show up, supposedly just a janitor, and take down multiple hostiles with precision that most of my HRT guys would struggle to match. So either you're the luckiest janitor in human history, or tonight wasn't nearly as random as it looks. Which is it?" Before Jack could answer, her radio crackled to life. "Reeves, this is command. We've got a problem with the Turner background check." Reeves's eyebrows rose. "Go ahead." "His records are wrong. Employment history checks out for the past 12 years, but before that there's nothing. No birth certificate, no school records, no medical history. It's like Jack Turner didn't exist before 2013. And when we ran his prints through CODIS," a pause, "they're not there. His biometrics aren't in any federal database. Not FBI, not DHS, not military. This guy is a ghost." Reeves looked at Jack with new understanding. "Not just call sign," she murmured. "Actual operational status." "Like I said," Jack replied quietly, "there are protections in place. Protocols. I'm not supposed to be findable because finding me could compromise things that matter more than one man's identity." "What things?" "The kind you don't ask about if you want to keep your security clearance." Reeves drummed her fingers on the table, clearly frustrated but also aware she was hitting walls she didn't have authority to breach. "Fine," she said finally. "We'll table the background questions for now, but understand this, Mr. Turner, or whatever your real name is. The situation isn't over. And those 6 men are in custody, and they're going to talk eventually. When they do, if your name comes up, if there's any indication you were involved in whatever corporate espionage bullshit they were pulling, no amount of classified protocols will protect you. Clear?" "Crystal," Jack confirmed. "But for what it's worth, I'd never seen any of those men before tonight. Whatever they were after Isabella Lane for, I'm not connected to it." "Then why did one of them call you Ghost?" "The younger one, right before you shot him. He screamed, 'It's him, it's the Ghost.' How did he know that name?" Jack had been hoping she wouldn't ask that question, but he should have known better. FBI agents didn't miss details. "The ring," he said, holding up his left hand where the tungsten carbide band caught the light. "Military code on the inside. Ghost 6 Omnia. To most people, it's meaningless, but to someone with the right background, someone who's heard the stories, he shrugged. It's a signature, a calling card. They recognized what it meant. Which means they were military, Reeves concluded, or worked with military. Former operators turned private contractors, probably. That'd be my guess. And they knew the ghost's reputation. Apparently. Reeves leaned forward, her voice dropping. Help me understand something. You've spent 12 years building a civilian life, staying off the grid, being invisible. Tonight, you could have stayed invisible, could have grabbed your daughter and run while everyone else was focused on the hostage situation. Instead, you intervened. Why? Jack thought about that question, about all the complicated reasons and simple truths that had led him to step out of the shadows. Because, he said finally, a long time ago, I made a promise that everyone comes home. And old promises die hard. The distance between Jack Turner and the stage was 42 feet. In his old life, that distance could be covered in less than 3 seconds, a blur of motion so fast that most people wouldn't register movement until it was over. But Jack wasn't that man anymore. He was older, carrying the weight of civilian years and the rust that accumulated when skills went unpracticed. 3 seconds would have to become 4, maybe 5. He didn't have 5 seconds. Target 3's finger was already tightening on the trigger, the micro-movements visible to anyone trained to read them. Jack's body moved before his conscious mind fully processed the decision, muscle memory overriding 12 years of deliberate suppression. The mop handle dropped from his hands, clattering against marble, and he was moving, cutting through the panicked crowd with the kind of precision that came from navigating hostile environments where one wrong step meant death. 20 feet. A woman in a red dress stumbled into his path, champagne-drunk and terrified. Jack shifted left, his hand steadying her elbow for a fraction of a second before releasing her, never breaking stride. 10 feet. Target 2, the heavily muscled one with the cross-draw setup, noticed movement in his peripheral vision, his head starting to turn, hand reaching for his weapon. 5 feet. Jack's world narrowed to a tunnel, everything outside his immediate threat assessment falling away into gray noise. Time didn't slow down. That was a myth, something civilians believed because they'd never experienced real violence. But his perception sharpened, details crystallizing with perfect clarity. Target 3's Sig Sauer was standard issue, 15-round magazine, one in the chamber. The angle of the barrel against Isabella's temple suggested a kill shot, 9mm hollow point that would paint the stage with her brain matter and guarantee no miraculous recovery. Target 2 had cleared his weapon, a Glock 19, 19-round capacity, and was bringing it around toward Jack, but the crowd between them created hesitation. Professional operators didn't shoot wildly into civilians, not because of morality, but because dead bystanders created investigations, media circuses, complications. Target 1 was turning now, too, his hand fumbling at his left hip, the bad knee Jack had identified making his rotation sluggish. 0 feet. Jack hit the stage at a dead run, his work boots finding purchase on the polished wood, and launched himself at Target 3 with every ounce of momentum his body could generate. The collision was catastrophic and precise. Jack's right shoulder drove into Target 3's center mass, while his left hand captured the gun hand, fingers locking around the wrist with crushing force, redirecting the barrel away from Isabella's head. The SIG went off. The gunshot in an enclosed space was physically painful, a hammer blow of compressed air that made eardrums flex and hearts stutter. People screamed. Someone shouted, "Gun!" as if the explosive report hadn't made that abundantly clear. The bullet that should have ended Isabella Lane's life instead punched through the ballroom's ornate ceiling, sending plaster dust raining down like snow. Jack and Target 3 hit the stage floor in a tangle of limbs, and for exactly 2 seconds, the professional killer's training warred with his shock at being attacked by someone he'd categorized as a non-threat. Those 2 seconds were all Jack needed. The disarm was textbook, brutal in its efficiency. Jack's thumb found the pressure point between Target 3's thumb and forefinger, grinding into nerve clusters while his other hand torqued the wrist in a direction wrists weren't designed to bend. Target 3's grip reflexively loosened, biology overriding willpower, and the Sig Sauer clattered across the stage. "Federal agent!" Jack shouted, The lie coming easily because sometimes lies saved lives. Everyone stay calm. He wasn't expecting anyone to believe him, not dressed in janitor clothes that still smelled like mop water and champagne. But people in crisis situations clung to authority figures, and sometimes the illusion of control was enough to prevent total chaos. Target 2 had a clearer shot now, the Glock trained on Jack's center mass, finger moving to the trigger. Jack's hands blurred through a motion so practiced it was basically involuntary. His left hand shot out, grabbed Isabella Lane's wrist, and yanked her down behind the dubious cover of the speaker's podium, while his body rolled left, Target 3's body coming with him, serving as an unwilling human shield. The Glock barked 3 times in rapid succession, professional 3-round burst designed for maximum stopping power. 2 rounds hit Target 3, chest and shoulder, the wet sound of bullets finding flesh, and the man's body jerked against Jack like a puppet with cut strings. The 3rd round sparked off the stage floor where Jack's head had been a heartbeat earlier. Target 3 wasn't dead. Body armor had caught the chest shot, though the impact had probably cracked ribs. But he was out of the fight, gasping for air, his professional composure shattered by pain and the sudden realization that his own teammate had just shot him. Jack didn't pause. Couldn't pause. The moment you stopped moving in close quarters combat was the moment you died. He came up from his roll in a crouch. Target 3's Sig Sauer now in his hand, acquired during the tumble across the stage, his fingers finding the grip with the familiarity of an old friend returning home. Target 2 was already adjusting his aim, the Glock tracking Jack's movement with mechanical precision. Jack fired first. The Sig's report was different from the Glock, slightly deeper, and the bullet caught Target 2 in the right shoulder. Deliberately, professionally, a shot designed to disable rather than kill. The Glock tumbled from suddenly nerveless fingers as Target 2 spun with the impact, his professional training the only thing keeping him upright. "Down! On the ground now!" Jack's voice carried across the ballroom with the kind of command that made people's hindbrains recognize a predator. "All of you, weapons down, or the next shot goes through bone!" Target 1 had finally cleared his weapon, the compact semi-automatic Jack had identified earlier, but his hand was shaking, adrenaline and the bad knee throwing off his aim. He fired anyway. 3 shots that went wide, one punching through the mayor's abandoned champagne flute on the podium, another shattering an overhead light. Jack returned fire twice. The first shot hit Target 1's gun hand, the bullet passing through the meat of his palm and exiting the other side in a spray of blood and bone fragments. The second shot, insurance, always get insurance, caught him in the thigh, far enough from the femoral artery to not be immediately fatal, but close enough to drop him like a puppet with cut strings. 3 targets down. 6 seconds elapsed since Jack had moved. His heart rate was steady at 68 beats per minute, a fact that would have disturbed him if he'd had time to think about it. The body remembers what the mind tries to forget. The 3 men at the ballroom entrance, the ones who'd burst through the doors as a distraction, were moving now, weapons out, converging on the stage with professional efficiency. One of them was speaking urgently into a radio mic at his collar, calling for backup, extraction, something. Jack's tactical assessment updated in real time. 3 fresh targets, alert and prepared, against one operator who was 12 years out of practice in protecting civilians who couldn't protect themselves. The math wasn't good. "Stop right there!" The voice came from Jack's left, sharp with authority and the kind of confidence that suggested backup. He risked a glance and saw Richard Moss, Isabella Lane's head of security, emerging from the crowd with his own weapon drawn, a SIG P226 that looked like a toy in his massive hands. Behind him came 2 more security officers, both armed, both looking competent, if not quite special forces caliber. The 3 men at the entrance hesitated, weapons still out but calculating new odds. 1 against 3 had been manageable. 4 against 3, with civilians in the crossfire and local law enforcement probably already en route, was a different equation entirely. The leader of this second trio, tall, bald, with the kind of face that suggested Eastern European extraction, spoke rapidly in a language Jack recognized as Russian. His teammates responded with curt nods, weapons lowering fractionally, bodies shifting into retreat posture. "You're making a mistake," the bald man said, his English heavily accented but clear. "This doesn't concern you. The woman has something that doesn't belong to her. Walk away, and you live." Jack rose from his crouch, the SIG still trained on center mass, his body positioned between the armed men and Isabella Lane. "Can't do that. You're brave. Stupid, but brave. The bald man's eyes narrowed, cataloging details, and something shifted in his expression, recognition dawning like a sunrise. Wait, that ring. Let me see your ring. Jack's left hand was visible, wrapped around the cig's grip, and the silver tungsten ring caught the fractured light from the damaged chandelier above. The inscription was too small to read at this distance, but apparently the ring itself was enough. The bald man's face went pale. He took an involuntary step backward, weapon lowering completely, and spoke a single word in Russian that Jack didn't need to understand because the tone carried all the meaning necessary. Fear. Prividenie, the man whispered. Ghost. The reaction rippled through the ballroom like electricity through water. The other two members of the bald man's team exchanged glances, their weapons dropping another few inches. Behind Jack, Richard Moss made a sound that was half gasp, half question. Even Isabella Lane, still crouched behind the podium with her expensive dress torn and her perfect hair disheveled, was staring at Jack with an expression that suggested her entire understanding of reality had just been violently restructured. That's not possible, the bald man continued, his Russian accent thickening with emotion. You're dead. We all saw the reports, the memorial. You died in the Hindu Kush. Jack said nothing. The ghost hadn't been a man who explained himself or justified his actions. The ghost was a weapon, pointed at problems that conventional forces couldn't solve, and weapons didn't negotiate. You worked for them, the bald man said, and his weapon was fully lowered now, hanging from a hand that had lost all tension. The ones who sent us here. You know what we are. You know what it means when they send people like us. Jack's expression didn't change, but inside pieces were clicking into place. The professional coordination, the military-grade weapons and tactics, the fact that these men knew his call sign, recognized a ring that only a very specific subset of the intelligence community would understand. This wasn't corporate espionage. This was wet work. And if the people who'd sent these operators were the same people Jack thought they were, then Isabella Lane had stumbled into something far more dangerous than patent theft or industrial sabotage. Call your handler, Jack said quietly. Tell them the ghost is active. Tell them if they want to pursue this contract, they can deal with me directly. The bald man's weapon was holstered now, his hands visible and empty in the universal gesture of non-aggression. He touched his collar mic, speaking rapidly in Russian, and Jack's rusty language skills caught fragments. Target compromised. Unknown element. Recommend abort. The response came through the man's earpiece, inaudible to anyone else. But Jack watched the color drain even further from the bald man's face. Whatever his handler had said, it had clearly been emphatic. We're leaving, the bald man announced, his voice carrying across the ballroom with the kind of authority that made even terrified civilians pause their fleeing. This contract is void. The woman lives. His eyes found Isabella Lane still crouched behind the podium. Consider yourself fortunate, Ms. Lane. You have a guardian angel, though I suspect he's more devil than divine. The three men backed toward the entrance, weapons holstered, moving with the kind of professional withdrawal that suggested they'd done this before. Missions that went sideways, operations that needed immediate exfiltration. They disappeared through the grand doors, and moments later, Jack heard the distinctive sound of a helicopter spinning up on the roof. The ballroom erupted. People who'd been frozen in terror suddenly found their voices. A cacophony of questions and accusations and demands for explanation. Cell phones emerged from pockets and purses, some calling 911, others filming everything for social media posterity. Richard Moss was barking orders into his radio, coordinating with his security team, trying to establish some semblance of control. And in the alcove by the service entrance, Ella Turner was standing on her bench, coloring books forgotten, her face streaming with tears as she watched her father with eyes that contained too much understanding for a 9-year-old child. Jack's heart broke. He'd kept his promise to Sarah for almost 3 years. 3 years of normalcy, of parent-teacher conferences and scraped knees and bedtime stories. 3 years of being just dad, nothing more, nothing less. Those 3 years had just ended. Nobody move! A new voice, sharp with law enforcement authority. Jack turned to see uniformed police officers flooding into the ballroom through multiple entrances, weapons drawn, faces showing the kind of adrenaline-fueled intensity that made trigger fingers itchy. Drop your weapon. Hands where I can see them. Jack complied immediately, setting the Sig Sauer on the stage floor and raising his hands to shoulder height, fingers spread. The last thing this situation needed was a scared cop shooting the wrong person. I'm the one who neutralized the threat, Jack said calmly. The injured men on the stage are the attackers. I'm unarmed now. My daughter is in the alcove by the service entrance. She's 9 years old and terrified. Please make sure someone checks on her. The police swarmed the stage, zip-tie restraints appearing from utility belts, weapons trained on everyone until they could sort out who was who. Jack allowed himself to be pushed face down onto the stage floor, hands secured behind his back with the plastic ties, the officer's knee pressed between his shoulder blades with enough force to make breathing difficult. Standard procedure. Jack had done the same thing countless times in his old life. Secure everyone. Sort it out later. Richard! Isabella Lane had found her voice, her CEO authority reasserting itself despite the torn dress and the plaster dust in her hair. Richard, tell them! That man saved my life. He's not the threat. Richard Moss was already moving toward the officers, his credentials out, his ex-Secret Service authority giving weight to his words. The suspect in custody is a friendly, he announced. I witnessed the entire engagement. He intervened to protect Miss Lane from an armed kidnapping attempt. The injured men on the stage are the perpetrators. The pressure on Jack's back eased fractionally. One of the officers, a sergeant based on the stripes, knelt beside him, face skeptical, but willing to listen. That true? Your security? Maintenance, Jack corrected. I'm just the janitor, but I have prior training. Prior training, the sergeant repeated, his tone suggesting he recognized massive understatement when he heard it. Uh-huh. And what kind of prior training lets a janitor disarm 3 armed suspects and neutralize a hostage situation in under 10 seconds? Jack said nothing. The ghost didn't explain. The ghost didn't justify. The sergeant's radio crackled with dispatch communications. Units responding, ambulances en route, FBI field office notified because interstate kidnapping made this federal jurisdiction. The officer listened for a moment, then looked back at Jack with an expression that was equal parts respect and confusion. Dispatch is saying somebody just called in from a blocked number, said they're FBI counterterrorism, said there's an operative on scene who's on our side. The sergeant paused. Said his call sign is Ghost. That you? Jack's mind raced. Someone had made that call, someone with enough access to reach dispatch directly and enough authority to make police officers stand down. The people who'd sent the Russian operators? Possible, but unlikely. They'd want him arrested, questioned, identified. His old command structure? Also unlikely. Officially, Jack Turner didn't exist anymore, and the ghost had been dead for 12 years, which meant someone else was watching, someone who knew who Jack really was and had decided to intervene. That's me, Jack said, because sometimes you had to accept help even when you didn't understand where it came from. The zip-tie restraints were cut. Strong hands helped Jack to his feet. The sergeant extended a hand and Jack shook it, noting the way the officer's grip was firm but not challenging, the handshake of someone who recognized a fellow professional. Hell of a thing, the sergeant said. Hell of a thing. The ballroom was controlled chaos. Paramedics had arrived, triaging the injured. Target 3 with his cracked ribs and gunshot wounds. Target 2 clutching his shattered shoulder. Target 1 leaving a blood trail across the marble as he was loaded onto a stretcher. None of them would die, Jack knew. He'd been very precise about that. Dead men couldn't provide intelligence, couldn't be interrogated, couldn't give up the names of whoever had sent them. Isabella Lane was being checked by a paramedic, more for shock than physical injury, but her eyes never left Jack. She was calculating, assessing, trying to reconcile the invisible janitor with the man who'd moved like lightning and shot like a professional. Richard Moss approached Jack, his SIG P226 holstered now, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, he said quietly. Somewhere private. Now. But before Jack could respond, before he could navigate this new reality he'd just created, he heard the sound that overrode every tactical consideration, every strategic calculation, every instinct except one, a child crying. Daddy! Ella had broken free from whoever was supposed to be watching her, sprinting across the ballroom with her arms outstretched, tears streaming down her face. Jack caught her as she launched herself at him, her small body colliding with his chest with enough force to make him stagger. "You're bleeding," she sobbed into his shoulder. "Daddy, you're bleeding. There's blood on your shirt. Are you hurt? Are you—" "Not my blood, baby girl," Jack murmured, holding her tight, one hand cradling her head while the other wrapped around her back. "I'm okay. We're okay. I promise." But they both knew it was a lie, because everyone in this ballroom had just seen what Jack Turner really was. The videos were already uploading to social media, shaky footage of the janitor moving like a trained killer, of impossible shots fired with perfect accuracy, of professional operators backing down because they recognized a ring and a reputation. By morning, Jack's face would be everywhere. The questions would start. Who was he? Where had he come from? What kind of janitor knew how to neutralize armed suspects with the efficiency of a special forces operator? And eventually, inevitably, someone would dig deep enough to find the truth. "Sir?" A detective had approached, notebook in hand, face professionally neutral. "I'm going to need a statement. Full account of what happened here tonight, starting with your name." Jack met the detective's eyes, still holding Ella, and made a decision. He'd spent 12 years running from his past, building a wall between who he'd been and who he wanted to be. That wall had just collapsed, and there was no rebuilding it. "Jack Turner," he said. "I'm the building's maintenance supervisor. I was working the event when armed men entered and took Miss Lane hostage. I intervened." The detective scribbled notes. "And your prior training? The sergeant mentioned you have experience." "Military," Jack said, which was technically true. "Infantry. Deployed overseas long time ago." More notes. "Infantry," the detective repeated, skepticism clear in his tone. "Right. And infantry training includes advanced close-quarters combat, precision shooting under stress, and tactical assault procedures?" "Some of us paid attention in basic training," Jack said mildly. The detective's expression suggested he knew he was being fed a line, but didn't have the ammunition to challenge it yet. "Uh-huh. Well, Mr. Turner, you should know that the FBI is going to want to talk to you, and probably Homeland Security, and definitely the district attorney's office, since there are 3 men on their way to the hospital with gunshot wounds, and you're the one who shot them." "Self-defense," Richard Moss interjected, moving to stand beside Jack. "And defense of others. Clear-cut case. I witnessed the entire incident, and I'll testify that Mr. Turner's actions were proportional, necessary, and saved lives." The detective nodded, adding this to his notes. "That's good. That'll help. But there's still going to be an investigation, Mr. Turner. People don't just walk away from discharging a firearm multiple times in a crowded public space, not without a lot of paperwork." "I understand," Jack said. More police were arriving now. Detectives in suits, crime scene techs with cameras and evidence bags, a lieutenant who immediately took command and started barking orders about witness statements and chain of custody. The ballroom that had been filled with champagne and laughter an hour ago now looked like a war zone. Shattered glass, bloodstains on marble, plaster dust coating everything like snow. Isabella Lane had finished with the paramedics and was making her way toward Jack, Richard Moss moving protectively at her side. Up close, Jack could see the fear in her eyes, the tremor in her hands that she was trying to control. Whatever those men had wanted from her, whatever file they'd mentioned, it had clearly touched something that terrified her. "Mr. Turner," she began, then stopped, seeming to realize how inadequate words were. "You saved my life. I can't. Thank you seems insufficient." "You don't need to thank me," Jack said. Ella had stopped crying but still clung to him with the grip of someone who'd nearly lost something irreplaceable. Wrong place, wrong time. Anyone would have done the same. "No," Isabella said firmly. "No, they wouldn't have. Did you see how many people ran? How many looked away? You moved toward the threat, Mr. Turner, not away. That's not normal. That's not ordinary. That's—" She paused, her eyes dropping to the silver ring on his left hand. "Who are you? Really?" Jack considered lying, considered giving her the same story he'd given the detective. Just a veteran, just someone with some basic training who got lucky. But Isabella Lane hadn't survived in the cutthroat world of corporate leadership by being stupid or easily deceived, and she'd heard what the Russian operator had called him. Ghost. I'm someone who used to be someone else, Jack said carefully. A long time ago. Another life. The Hindu Kush, Isabella said, and Jack's blood went cold. She'd heard more of the conversation than he'd realized. That man said you died in the Hindu Kush. He recognized your ring. He called you. Don't, Jack interrupted, his voice sharper than he intended. Please. Whatever you heard, whatever you think you know, it's better if you forget it. For your safety and mine. Isabella studied him for a long moment, her CEO instincts clearly warring with her human curiosity. Finally, she nodded. Okay, for now. But Mr. Turner, those men weren't random criminals. They knew things about me, about something I supposedly took. And they were professional enough that seeing your ring, made them abort a mission. That suggests connections, resources, organization. I know, Jack said quietly. Which means they might come back, or send others. And while I have excellent security, she glanced at Richard Moss, I don't have someone who can do what you just did. Jack saw where this was going and shook his head. Miss Lane, I appreciate the implied offer, but I'm not that person anymore. I'm a janitor, a single father. I just want to take my daughter home and forget this night ever happened. Daddy? Ella's voice was small, muffled against his shoulder. Are the bad men gone? They're gone, baby girl, Jack assured her. All gone. But what if they come back? It was the question Jack had been asking himself since the moment the Russian operator had recognized his ring. Because men like that didn't just walk away. They retreated, regrouped, and returned with better planning and superior force. And whoever had sent them, whoever was pulling strings from somewhere in the shadows, they now knew that Jack Turner was alive, active, and protecting Isabella Lane, which made him a problem that would need to be solved. They won't come back, Jack lied, because you told children the lies that let them sleep at night. I promise. But over Ella's head, his eyes met Isabella's, and they both knew the truth. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The detective returned with more questions. The FBI arrived and wanted their own statement. Richard Moss was coordinating with his team, establishing a security perimeter, arranging for Isabella's immediate relocation to a secure location. The ballroom slowly emptied of civilians, replaced by law enforcement and emergency personnel, all of them working to process what would undoubtedly become the most high-profile incident in the city's recent history. And through it all, Jack held his daughter and watched the life he'd carefully constructed over 12 years crack and crumble like cheap plaster. The mayor approached, his face grave, his concerns seemingly genuine. Mr. Turner, on behalf of the city, I want to thank you for your bravery tonight. What you did, stepping in when trained security hesitated, neutralizing armed threats with minimal civilian casualties, it's nothing short of heroic. Jack bit back the response that wanted to emerge, that heroes were dead people, and he'd survived this long by being very good at not dying. Instead, he nodded politely and said, "Just did what needed doing, sir." Still, the mayor continued, the city recognizes exceptional service. I'd like to present you with a commendation, perhaps arrange a ceremony. No, Jack said, more sharply than he intended. No ceremonies, no commendations, no public recognition, please. The mayor blinked, clearly unused to people refusing his offers of publicity. Mr. Turner, I understand humility, but what you did deserves acknowledgement. The people of this city should know. The people of this city should go back to their lives and forget I exist, Jack interrupted. Mayor, with all due respect, every second my face is in the news, every photo that circulates on social media, I become more of a target, and I have a daughter to protect. Understanding dawned in the mayor's eyes. Of course, you're right. We'll keep your identity out of official statements. But Mr. Turner, you should know that several dozen people filmed what happened here tonight. Those videos are probably already viral. Your anonymity might not be something we can preserve. Jack had already accepted that reality. The moment he'd moved, the moment he'd decided that protecting Isabella Lane was worth exposing himself, he'd known there would be consequences. You couldn't deploy that level of skill, couldn't move with that kind of precision, without raising questions that would eventually find answers. I understand, Jack said quietly, but I'd appreciate any discretion you can provide. The mayor nodded and withdrew, probably already calculating how to spin this incident for maximum political advantage while honoring Jack's request for anonymity. A difficult balance, but mayors didn't rise to power without learning how to walk tightropes. Richard Moss returned, his phone in hand, face grim. "We have a problem," he said quietly, positioning himself so only Jack and Isabella could hear. "My team just finished checking the building's security footage. Those 6 operators, the 3 who took the stage and the 3 who created the diversion, they didn't arrive tonight. They've been in the building for 3 days. Isabella's face went pale. 3 days? That's impossible. We have facial recognition, biometric scanners, security checkpoints. They bypassed everything, Moss interrupted. Probably had inside help, someone in facilities or maintenance who could create blind spots in the coverage. They've been living in the mechanical spaces between floors, observing routines, planning their approach. This wasn't opportunistic, Ms. Lane. This was surgical. Jack's tactical mind was already extrapolating implications. 3 days meant detailed reconnaissance. It meant they'd studied Isabella's movements, her security protocols, her habits and patterns. It meant they'd identified the ballroom event as the optimal strike window. Maximum chaos, maximum witnesses, maximum pressure to comply quickly. It also meant they'd probably identified escape routes, secondary positions, contingency plans. Professional operators always had contingencies. "You need to leave the city," Jack said bluntly. "Tonight. Don't go home. Don't go to your office. Don't go anywhere they might anticipate. Find somewhere remote, somewhere you've never been before, and stay there until we understand what we're dealing with." "We?" Isabella raised an eyebrow. "I thought you were just a janitor who wanted to go home." Jack looked at his daughter, still clinging to him, her face buried in his shoulder. Then he looked at Isabella Lane, brilliant, terrified, clearly in over her head, and felt the old instincts rising. The ones that said when you saw someone drowning, you didn't walk away just because getting wet was inconvenient. "The people who sent those men now know I'm involved," Jack said quietly. "Which means my daughter and I are already targets. The only way we get clear of this is by ending the threat permanently. And the only way to end it is by understanding what you took, what they think you have, and why they're willing to commit federal crimes to get it back." Isabella started to respond, then stopped, her eyes widening as she looked past Jack toward the ballroom entrance. Jack turned, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer carried, and saw a figure standing in the doorway. The man was in his 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Jack's car. But it was his bearing that set him apart, the kind of absolute confidence that came from decades of wielding real power, not the cheap imitation that came with money or political office. "Ms. Lane," the man said, his voice carrying across the ballroom with casual authority, "I believe we need to have a conversation about the Prometheus file, and about why you thought stealing classified research from the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency was a sound business decision." The ballroom, already tense with the aftermath of violence and adrenaline, went absolutely silent. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Every police officer and detective turned toward the doorway. Even the crime scene technicians paused their evidence collection, cameras lowering as they stared at the silver-haired man who'd just dropped a classified acronym into a room full of local law enforcement like a grenade without a pin. Isabella Lane's face drained of color so completely that Jack thought she might faint. Her hand reached out, grasping Richard Moss's arm for support, her perfectly manicured nails digging into the fabric of his suit jacket hard enough to leave crescents in the material. "Who the hell are you?" Richard demanded, his hand moving toward his holstered weapon with the kind of casual readiness that suggested he was 3 seconds from drawing it. The silver-haired man smiled, but the expression held no warmth. He reached into his jacket pocket, moving slowly, deliberately, giving everyone time to see that he wasn't reaching for a weapon, and produced a leather credential case. He flipped it open, holding it up so the federal badge caught the fractured light from the damaged chandeliers. "Deputy Director Marcus Webb, Defense Intelligence Agency," he announced, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made even the senior police lieutenant straighten unconsciously. "This incident is now under federal jurisdiction. I'm going to need everyone without a security clearance above top secret to clear the room. That includes local law enforcement." The police lieutenant, a man named Reeves, according to his name tag, stepped forward, his jaw set. With all due respect, sir, this is an active crime scene. Multiple felonies occurred here tonight, including attempted kidnapping, assault with deadly weapons, and discharge of firearms in a public space. I'm not clearing my people until I understand what authority gives you the right to supersede a local investigation. Webb's smile widened fractionally. The authority of national security, Lieutenant. The Prometheus file Ms. Lane stole, and yes, we have proof of the theft, including digital forensics and testimony from 3 different whistleblowers inside Sterling Enterprises, contains classified research into next-generation weapons systems. Research that, if it fell into the wrong hands, could compromise American military superiority and endanger lives around the world. He paused, letting that sink in, his eyes moving across the room to make sure everyone understood the gravity of what he was saying. So when I say this is federal jurisdiction, what I mean is that your crime scene, your investigation, and your suspects are all now matters of national security. You can cooperate, or I can have the Attorney General call your mayor and explain why the city police department is interfering with a DIA operation. Your choice, Lieutenant. Reeves's face flushed red, anger and frustration warring with the practical reality that fighting federal agencies was a battle local police never won. Fine, he bit out, but I want documentation, official transfer of jurisdiction, signed orders, the whole 9 yards. I'm not letting you just walk in here and... You'll have everything you need within the hour, Webb interrupted smoothly. My people are already coordinating with your chief. But right now, I need this room cleared of everyone except Ms. Lane, her security chief. And his eyes found Jack still holding Ella, and something flickered in his expression. The maintenance worker who apparently has a very interesting skill set. Jack felt ice water replacing the blood in his veins. This was it. The moment he'd been dreading for 12 years. Someone with access to the right databases, the right classified files, had put the pieces together. The call sign, the ring, the tactical proficiency that no janitor should possess. Deputy Director Marcus Webb knew exactly who Jack Turner really was. The police began filing out, Reeves leading his people with stiff shoulders and barely contained resentment. The crime scene techs packed their equipment, casting curious glances at Webb and his mysterious credentials. Within 5 minutes, the vast ballroom held only 6 people: Webb, Isabella, Richard Moss, Jack, Ella, and 2 men in dark suits who'd appeared behind Webb like silent shadows, their bearing screaming Federal Protection Detail. Ms. Lane, Webb began, his tone shifting from authoritative to something almost conversational, you've been a very difficult woman to track. The shell companies, the offshore accounts, the encrypted communications, quite elaborate for a corporate CEO. Almost as if you were trying to hide something. Isabella had regained some of her composure, her spine straightening, her voice steady when she spoke. I don't know what you're talking about. Sterling Enterprises conducts legitimate business research. If someone within my organization accessed classified materials without authorization, that's news to me. Really? Webb pulled out a tablet from his other jacket pocket, swiping through screens with practiced efficiency. Because we have emails with your digital signature authorizing payments to a former DARPA contractor named Dr. Chen Liu. We have bank transfers from Sterling accounts to Dr. Chen's Cayman Islands holdings. We have phone records showing 63 calls between your private cell and Dr. Chen's burner phones over a 6-month period. He looked up from the tablet, his expression hard. We have everything, Ms. Lane. The only question now is whether you cooperate and potentially avoid federal prison, or whether you stonewall and spend the next 20 years in a cell. Jack watched Isabella's face, saw the moment her options crystallized in her mind. She was brilliant. You didn't become the youngest Fortune 500 CEO by being stupid, and she could clearly see that Webb had done his homework. The evidence was overwhelming. The path forward was narrow, but there was something else in her eyes too, something that looked like relief. It wasn't supposed to be classified, Isabella said quietly, her voice barely carrying across the now empty ballroom. Dr. Chen told me the research had been abandoned, that DARPA had shut down the program, that the data was essentially public domain. He said the only reason it was still marked classified was bureaucratic inertia. Dr. Chen lied, Webb said flatly. The Prometheus program wasn't abandoned. It was compartmentalized after we discovered security breaches. Dr. Chen was one of 3 researchers we suspected of planning to sell the technology to foreign interests. We were building a case against him when he disappeared. 3 weeks later, Sterling Enterprises announced a breakthrough in energy systems, breakthrough that happened to be identical to classified Prometheus research. Ella stirred in Jack's arms, her voice small and frightened. "Daddy, I don't understand what's happening. Who are these people? Why are they talking about prison?" Jack's heart clenched. This was exactly what he'd been trying to avoid, Ella being exposed to the shadows and secrets that defined his old life. "It's okay, baby girl," he murmured, though they both knew it wasn't. "These people are just trying to sort out some grown-up problems. Nothing for you to worry about." Webb's eyes moved to Ella, and something in his expression softened fractionally. "How old is your daughter, Mr. Turner?" 9, Jack said, his voice carefully neutral. "And if this is a conversation about national security and classified research, maybe she shouldn't be here." "I agree." Webb gestured to one of his protection detail, a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and the kind of build that suggested serious gym time. "Agent Morrison, would you mind taking the young lady to one of the private offices upstairs? Maybe find her some hot chocolate, put on a movie?" Ella's grip on Jack tightened. "I don't want to leave Daddy." "I know, sweetheart," Webb said, and the gentleness in his voice seemed genuine. "But your father and I need to have a very boring adult conversation about very boring adult things. You'll be much happier watching cartoons with Agent Morrison, and I promise," he looked directly at Jack, "your father will come get you as soon as we're done talking. You have my word." Jack wanted to refuse, wanted to keep Ella close where he could protect her. But the truth was that whatever conversation was about to happen, his daughter didn't need to hear it. The details of classified programs and federal crimes and whatever role Jack had played in his former life, those weren't things a 9-year-old should be exposed to. "Go with Agent Morrison," Jack said softly, loosening his grip on Ella even though every instinct screamed at him to hold tighter. "She'll take care of you, and I'll be there before you know it, okay?" Ella's eyes were wet, but she nodded, sliding down from Jack's arms with visible reluctance. Agent Morrison extended a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Ella took it. "What kind of movies do you like?" Morrison asked as she led Ella toward the exit, her voice warm and conversational. "I bet there's a Disney Plus account somewhere in this building." Their voices faded as they disappeared through the doorway, and Jack felt part of his soul go with them. Ella was his anchor, his reason for maintaining the fiction of normalcy. Without her here, he was just a man standing in a ballroom full of secrets and lies, facing people who knew exactly what those secrets were. Webb waited until Morrison and Ella were gone before speaking again. "Commander Jack Turner, call sign Ghost, leader of Special Operations Task Force 6, officially killed in action January 2013 during a classified operation in the Hindu Kush Mountains." He paused, studying Jack's face. "Except you weren't killed, were you? You were extracted, given a new identity, and told to disappear. And for 12 years you did. Until tonight." Richard Moss had gone pale, his eyes darting between Webb and Jack with an expression that suggested his entire understanding of reality was being rewritten in real time. "Commander," he repeated, "your military, special forces?" "Was," Jack corrected quietly. "A long time ago, different life." "Jesus Christ," Richard breathed. I was Secret Service, presidential detail. I thought I knew how to spot operators. You've been working maintenance in this building for 6 months, and I never, not once, I never even suspected." "That was the point," Webb said. "The Ghost program was one of the most classified operations in modern military history. The soldiers selected for Task Force 6 underwent psychological conditioning, specialized training, and identity suppression protocols that made them functionally invisible in civilian contexts. They could blend into any environment, any socioeconomic level, any community. And when situations required their particular skill set, they could transition from civilian to operator in seconds." He gestured toward the stage where blood still stained the marble, where evidence markers showed the positions where Jack had neutralized 3 armed men with the kind of precision that most SWAT teams couldn't achieve. "Like tonight, maintenance worker one moment, tactical assault specialist the next. It's actually quite impressive, Commander. Most Ghost operatives couldn't maintain the fiction for more than a few years before the conditioning broke down. But 12 years? That's exceptional. Jack said nothing. What could he say? That he'd maintained the fiction because his wife had been real, his daughter was real, his love for them was the only truth he'd clung to in a world built on deception? That the conditioning hadn't broken down because he'd never wanted to be the ghost again? Isabella was staring at him with an expression that mixed awe and fear in equal measure. "You're a government assassin," she said, her voice hollow. "The janitor I barely noticed for 6 months is a trained killer who—" "What? How many people have you—" "Zero," Jack interrupted. Task Force 6 had a perfect record. Every mission, every operation, everyone came home alive. That was the Ghost's reputation. Impossible missions with 0 casualties. I never killed anyone who didn't absolutely need killing, and I spent every day trying to find ways to accomplish objectives without violence. "How noble," Webb said dryly. "Which is why the operation in the Hindu Kush went so well, despite losing a helicopter, evading enemy forces for 6 weeks, and emerging with your entire team intact, but the mission objectives completely unfulfilled." The words hit Jack like a physical blow. The Hindu Kush operation, the mission that had ended his military career, that had resulted in his official death and civilian resurrection, had been a disaster by every metric except the one that mattered to Jack. His team survived. "The objectives were flawed," Jack said quietly. "The intelligence was wrong. The targets weren't enemy combatants. They were civilians, refugees fleeing from Taliban forces. I wasn't going to authorize an airstrike on women and children just because some analyst 5,000 miles away misidentified them as hostiles." Webb's expression didn't change. And that decision, that unauthorized deviation from mission parameters, cost the United States strategic intelligence that could have prevented 3 terrorist attacks in the following year, attacks that killed 47 people, including 2 Americans. But at least you maintained your moral high ground, Commander. The accusation hung in the air like poisoned gas. Jack had heard it before, during the debriefings, during the psychological evaluations, during the meetings where men with stars on their shoulders had explained why Task Force 6 was being dissolved and why Jack Turner needed to die. He'd killed the mission to save innocent lives, and people had died because the intelligence his mission was supposed to gather never materialized. There was no right answer, no clean moral calculation. Just impossible choices and their cascading consequences. "Why are you here?" Jack asked, changing the subject because dwelling on 12-year-old decisions served no purpose. "If you knew I was alive, if you've been tracking me, why reveal yourself now? Why not just disappear me again, make the janitor vanish the same way the commander did?" Webb smiled, and this time the expression carried genuine amusement. "Because, Ghost, I need you. The men who attacked Ms. Lane tonight weren't random contractors. They were Volok Tactical, a Russian private military company that specializes in wet work and corporate espionage. The same company that's been hired by a Chinese state-owned enterprise to acquire the Prometheus research by any means necessary." He pulled up another screen on his tablet, showing photographs of the men Jack had fought. "These 6 were just the first wave. Volk has another 12 operators in the city, and we have intelligence suggesting they're planning a second attempt within 48 hours. Miss Lane's security," he nodded respectfully toward Richard Moss, "is excellent, but they're not equipped to handle a sustained assault by military-trained operators." "Get her out of the city," Jack said immediately. "Federal protection, relocated to a secure facility, maintained under guard until you roll up the entire Volk cell." "We could do that," Webb agreed. "Or we could use Ms. Lane as bait and eliminate Volk's entire operation in one decisive strike, which is where you come in, Commander." Jack felt the trap closing around him, inevitable as gravity. "No, I'm retired. I'm civilian. I'm a single father who just wants to take his daughter home and pretend tonight never happened." "Tonight already happened," Webb countered. "Those videos of you neutralizing armed suspects with operator-level proficiency are already viral. By morning, every intelligence agency in the world will be analyzing that footage, running facial recognition, trying to identify the mysterious janitor with ghost-level skills. Your anonymity is gone, Commander. The question now is whether you use the limited time you have left to protect your daughter by eliminating the threat permanently, or whether you run and hope they don't find you before you're too old to fight back." Isabella spoke up, her voice steadier now, her CEO instincts reasserting themselves despite the fear in her eyes. I don't want to be bait. I don't want anyone else getting hurt because I made a mistake trusting Dr. Chen. If there's a way to end this without more violence, there isn't, Webb interrupted bluntly. The Chinese don't give up when they want something. Neither does Volk. They'll keep coming, keep escalating, until either they get the Prometheus data or enough people die that continuing the operation becomes more expensive than abandoning it. The only way to truly end this is to make it clear that pursuing you is a death sentence. He turned back to Jack, his expression hardening. That's where the ghost comes in. We set up a scenario where Volk makes their second attempt. You're in position, along with a DIA tactical team, as backup. When they move on Ms. Lane, we eliminate them, permanently, publicly, and with enough violence that Volk's leadership thinks twice before accepting another contract against American interests. You want me to kill them, Jack said flatly. You want me to break my retirement, expose myself to foreign intelligence agencies, and murder Russian contractors in what I'm guessing would be a legally questionable operation at best. I want you to protect American citizens and classified research from foreign aggression, Webb corrected. The fact that it requires violence is regrettable, but necessary. And as for the legal questions, he smiled coldly. The DIA has an entire department devoted to creating legal justifications for operations that exist in gray areas. You'll be fine, Commander. You'll be a hero, actually. The man who stopped foreign mercenaries from stealing American military secrets. Jack looked at Isabella, saw the fear and guilt warring in her expression. Looked at Richard Moss, saw the calculation of a professional security operator trying to determine if Webb's plan had merit. Looked at the blood on the stage, the evidence of violence he'd tried so hard to leave behind. I need to think about this, Jack said finally. I need to talk to my daughter, make arrangements for her safety, figure out. You have 2 hours, Webb interrupted, checking his expensive watch. Volk's next operation window opens at midnight. If you're not committed by then, we'll implement Plan B, which involves Ms. Lane being relocated to a federal facility where she'll remain under protection indefinitely, possibly for years, while we attempt to dismantle Volk through slower, more conventional means. Years? Isabella's voice cracked. I can't. My company, my responsibilities. I have a board meeting next week, a merger that depends on my presence. Your company will survive without you, Webb said, not unkindly. But you won't survive without protection. Those are the options, Ms. Lane. 2 hours, Commander. Choose wisely. He gestured to his remaining protection detail, a man built like a linebacker with cold eyes that had clearly seen significant violence. Agent Rawlings will escort you to your daughter. You can use the private office on the 41st floor to make whatever arrangements you need. But understand, every minute you delay is a minute Volk uses to prepare their next move. Jack wanted to argue, wanted to explain all the reasons why this was insane, why pulling him back into a world he'd left behind was dangerous for everyone involved. But Webb was right about one thing. The moment Jack had moved tonight, the moment he'd revealed what he could do, his civilian life had ended. The only question now was whether he tried to run from the consequences or face them head on. 41st floor, Jack said quietly. 2 hours. Then I'll give you my answer. Webb nodded, satisfied, and turned his attention back to Isabella. Ms. Lane, we need to discuss the specifics of what you took from Dr. Chen, what Sterling Enterprises has done with the research, and how much of it has been compromised. That conversation needs to happen now, and it needs to be completely honest. Agent Rawlings, escort Commander Turner to the private offices. Make sure he has everything he needs. Rawlings moved to Jack's side, his presence less threatening than simply overwhelming. This way, sir, he said, his voice carrying the flat effect of someone who'd learned to feel nothing while doing terrible things. Jack followed, his mind already racing through scenarios and probabilities, trying to find a path forward that didn't end with his daughter orphaned or himself dead. The ballroom doors closed behind them, muffling the sound of Webb interrogating Isabella about classified research and corporate espionage. The elevator ride to the 41st floor was silent, except for the mechanical hum of cables and motors. Rawlings stood at parade rest, his eyes forward, his presence filling the small space with the kind of quiet menace that came from absolute confidence in one's ability to inflict violence. You served? Jack asked quietly. Marines, Rawlings said without looking at him. Force Recon. 2 deployments in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq. Got recruited by DIA after my 3rd tour ended. Been working protection details and tactical operations for 6 years. Like what Webb's proposing? Rawlings' eyes flickered toward Jack, assessment and calculation visible in their depths. Sir, I've worked with the Deputy Director for 4 years. In that time, I've participated in operations across 3 continents, eliminated threats to American interests in ways that would never hold up in civilian courts, and watched good people die because we waited too long to act decisively. He paused. Webb's plan tonight isn't ideal, but it's pragmatic. Volk won't stop until they're stopped. You know that better than anyone. The elevator doors opened onto a floor of executive offices, the kind of corporate luxury that existed to impress clients and intimidate competitors. Rawlings led Jack down a hallway lined with artwork that probably cost more than Jack's annual salary, stopping at a door marked Executive Conference Room. Inside, Ella sat on a leather couch that could have seated 8 people, a mug of hot chocolate in her hands, watching something animated on a massive wall-mounted television. Agent Morrison sat nearby, her posture relaxed but her eyes constantly scanning, the eternal vigilance of someone trained to spot threats before they materialized. "Daddy!" Ella set down her hot chocolate and ran to Jack, throwing her arms around his waist. "Agent Morrison has been really nice. She let me pick any movie I wanted, and she knows all the princesses' names, and she said after this we could watch another one if I wanted." "That's great, baby girl," Jack said, kneeling to be at her eye level, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Agent Morrison, could you give us a few minutes? Private conversation?" Morrison looked to Rawlings, who nodded once. Both agents stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind them with a soft click that somehow felt more ominous than a slamming. Jack guided Ella back to the couch, sitting beside her, trying to find words that would explain the unexplainable to a 9-year-old who'd already seen far too much tonight. "Sweetheart, we need to talk about what happened downstairs. About what you saw." Ella's face grew serious, older than her years. "You hurt those bad men. You had a gun. You moved like in the movies Mom never let me watch." "I know," Jack said softly, "and I'm sorry you had to see that. That's not who I want to be. That's not who I've been since you were born." "But that's who you were before, right?" Ella's eyes, Sarah's eyes, searched his face. "Before Mom, before me, you were a soldier who did dangerous things." There was no point in lying. Ella had heard Webb's speech, had heard the title Commander, had seen her father move with a proficiency that couldn't be explained away as basic infantry training. "Yes," Jack admitted. "A long time ago, I was a soldier. I did dangerous things, impossible things, things I'm not proud of. But when I met your mom, when you were born, I walked away from all of that. I became just Dad. And that's all I've wanted to be for your entire life." "But now the dangerous things found us anyway," Ella said, her voice small but steady. "Those bad men who wanted to hurt that lady, they knew who you were. They were scared of you." "They were scared of who I used to be," Jack corrected. "The ghost. That's what they called me. Because I was good at being invisible, at moving through places without being seen. But that person, he died a long time ago. He died so that you could have a normal father, a normal life." Ella was quiet for a long moment, her small hands wrapped around the cooling mug of hot chocolate. "Mom knew, didn't she, about the ghost?" Jack felt his throat tighten. "Your mom knew I had a past. She didn't know the details, didn't want to know. She just knew that I loved her, that I loved you, and that I'd do anything to protect our family. That was enough for her." "Is that why you saved that lady tonight? To protect people?" "Yes. But now you're in trouble because of it. That man, Deputy Director Webb, he wants you to do dangerous things again. I heard Agent Morrison talking to Agent Rawlings on her phone." Ella looked up at Jack, tears forming in her eyes. "Daddy, I don't want you to die like Mom died. I can't. If I lose you too—" Jack pulled her into a tight embrace, feeling her small body shake with sobs she'd been holding back since the moment the ballroom had erupted into chaos. "You're not going to lose me, baby girl. I promise. Whatever happens, whatever I have to do, I'm coming back to you. Always." But even as he said the words, Jack knew they might be a lie. The operation Webb was proposing, using Isabella as bait, engaging Volk operators in a direct confrontation, had too many variables, too many opportunities for things to go catastrophically wrong. Professional military contractors didn't go down easy, and 12 years of rust meant Jack's reflexes, his tactical judgment, his ability to predict and counter threats might not be what they once were. He could die. He probably would die if he agreed to Webb's plan. But if he didn't agree, if he took Ella and ran, they'd spend the rest of their lives looking over their shoulders. Volk would find them eventually, or some other threat would emerge. And without the DIA's resources and protection, Jack would be trying to defend his daughter alone. The math was brutal but clear. Take the fight to Volk now, with support and planning, or wait for the fight to find them later, in circumstances of the enemy's choosing.
"I need to make a phone call," Jack said quietly, releasing Ella and pulling out his cell phone, an ancient flip phone that still used physical buttons because smartphones left too much digital footprint. "It's going to be boring adult conversation. Can you finish your movie while I talk?" Ella nodded, wiping her eyes, trying to be brave in the way children did when they sensed their parents needed them to be strong. "Okay, Daddy." Jack moved to the far corner of the conference room, near windows that looked out over the city's glittering nightscape. He dialed a number from memory, one he hadn't called in 3 years, and waited through 4 rings before a voice answered. "Turner." "Jesus Christ, is this actually you?" "Hey, Marcus," Jack said quietly. "I need a favor." Marcus Chen, no relation to the doctor.
Chen, who'd stolen classified research, had been Task Force 6's intelligence specialist, the man who'd kept them alive through impossible missions with his ability to predict enemy movements and identify escape routes. After the Hindu Kush operation, after they'd all officially died and been resurrected as civilians, Marcus had taken his considerable talents to the private sector, establishing a security consultancy that catered to individuals who needed to disappear. "A favor," Marcus repeated, his voice carrying equal parts disbelief and concern. "Jack, I saw the videos. The entire internet saw the videos. You neutralized 3 armed operators in under 10 seconds. That's not favor-level problems. That's, your cover is completely blown and hostile intelligence agencies are probably triangulating your position right now problems." "I know," Jack said. "Which is why I need you to take Ella, tonight, right now. Get her somewhere safe, somewhere isolated, somewhere that if I don't survive the next 48 hours, she'll be protected and cared for." Silence on the other end of the line, broken only by the sound of Marcus breathing and the faint background noise of traffic. "You're going active again," Marcus said finally. "Webb found you. That magnificent bastard actually tracked down the ghost and convinced him to come out of retirement." "He didn't convince me of anything," Jack said sharply. "But there's a threat. Russian contractors, Volk Tactical, 12 operators in the city planning to assassinate a civilian target. If I don't stop them now, they'll keep coming. And eventually they'll figure out where Ella and I live, where she goes to school, where we're vulnerable. So you're going to kill them all," Marcus said matter-of-factly. "Classic ghost solution. Eliminate the threat permanently so it can't regenerate."
I'm going to try to stop them with minimal casualties," Jack corrected, though they both knew that was probably wishful thinking. "But yes, if it comes down to violence, I'll do what's necessary. I just need to know that Ella is safe first, that if something goes wrong, she'll be taken care of." Another pause. Then Marcus said something Jack had known was coming but still hurt to hear. "Sarah made me promise, right before she died. Made me swear that if anything ever happened to you, if the past ever caught up and you couldn't protect Ella, I'd step in. I'd be the uncle she needed." Jack's vision blurred. "She told me the same thing. Said you were the only person from my old life she trusted completely. Where's Ella now?" "Executive conference room, 41st floor of Sterling Tower. 2 DIA protection agents outside the door. You'll need to coordinate with Deputy Director Webb, convince him that she's safer in your custody than in federal protection." "Webb's smart enough to recognize a good solution when he hears one," Marcus said. Jack could hear movement on the other end of the line, the sound of drawers opening, equipment being gathered. "I can be there in 90 minutes. That gives you time to say goodbye properly." "Thank you," Jack said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. "Don't thank me yet. Just don't die, okay? Ella's already lost her mother. She doesn't need to lose you too." The call disconnected. Jack stood at the window, looking out at the city where somewhere 12 Russian contractors were planning their next move, preparing for violence, confident in their training and equipment and the element of surprise. They'd be wrong about that last part. Jack was done being surprised. He returned to the couch where Ella was watching her movie, sat down beside her, and pulled her close. "Baby girl, I need to tell you about a man named Marcus. Uncle Marcus. Though you've never met him."
The conversation took 20 minutes. Ella asked questions, good questions, the kind that showed she understood the gravity of what Jack was proposing, and Jack answered as honestly as he could without terrifying her. Yes, he was going to do something dangerous. Yes, there was a possibility he might get hurt. Yes, Uncle Marcus was someone she could trust completely, someone who'd known her mother, someone who'd promised to always look out for her. "But you'll come back," Ella said, and it wasn't quite a question. "I'll do everything in my power to come back," Jack promised. "And when I do, we're going to leave this city, find somewhere quiet and safe, somewhere with good schools and parks, and maybe a dog if you still want one. Somewhere we can be normal again." "Okay," Ella whispered. "I believe you, Daddy." Jack held her until Morrison knocked softly on the door, announcing that someone named Marcus Chen was in the building and Deputy Director Webb wanted confirmation before allowing him access to the 41st floor. Jack gave that confirmation, and 20 minutes later Marcus walked into the conference room. He looked older than Jack remembered, grayer, more lines around his eyes, but the sharp intelligence was still there, the quick assessment of threats and opportunities that had made him invaluable in Task Force 6. "Hey, Jack," Marcus said quietly. Then to Ella, "And you must be the famous Ella I've heard so much about. Your dad's told me you're an amazing artist." Ella looked between Jack and Marcus, her 9-year-old instincts clearly trying to determine if this stranger was safe. "Daddy says you knew my mom." "I did," Marcus confirmed, kneeling to be at her eye level. "Sarah was one of the kindest people I ever met. She had this laugh that made everyone around her smile, and she was absolutely fearless when it came to protecting the people she loved. You look like her, you know, same eyes, same determination." Something in Ella's posture relaxed. "Daddy says I'm going to stay with you for a little while, that you're going to keep me safe." "The safest," Marcus promised. "I have a cabin in the mountains 3 hours from here. No neighbors, no city noise, just trees and a lake, and the best stargazing you've ever seen. Your dad told me you like stars." Ella nodded slowly. "Okay, but Daddy has to promise to call me every day." "Every single day," Jack agreed, though he had no idea if he'd be able to keep that promise. "And when this is all over, I'm coming to get you, no matter what." The goodbyes were harder than Jack had anticipated. Ella clung to him, tears streaming down her face, and Jack had to physically pry her arms from around his neck, his own vision blurred beyond recognition. Marcus waited patiently, his expression sympathetic, until finally Jack managed to transfer Ella to his old teammate's care. "Take care of my girl," Jack said, his voice rough. "With my life," Marcus promised. "You just make sure you come back to her. She's already lost too much." They left, Ella looking back over Marcus's shoulder, her small hand waving, until the elevator doors closed, and she was gone. Jack stood in the hallway, feeling like someone had carved out his chest and left nothing but empty space behind. Agent Rawlings appeared beside him. "It's time, sir. Deputy Director Webb is waiting in the operations center. We have 45 minutes until Volk's next window opens." Jack nodded, not trusting his voice. He followed Rawlings to another elevator, this one requiring a key card and biometric scan to access, descending to sublevels that Jack hadn't known existed in Sterling Tower. The operations center was pure government efficiency. Banks of monitors showing security feeds from across the city, communication equipment that probably cost more than Jack's apartment building, and a tactical planning table covered with maps and satellite imagery. Webb stood at the head of the table, now wearing tactical gear instead of his expensive suit, looking 10 years younger and significantly more dangerous. "Commander," Webb said, "welcome back to the world. Let's discuss how we're going to end Volk Tactical permanently." The tactical planning table glowed with overlaid satellite imagery, street maps, and real-time tracking data that painted a picture of a city unaware it was hosting a shadow war.
Webb's finger traced routes on the illuminated surface, marking positions with the casual expertise of someone who'd planned hundreds of operations just like this one. Volk's remaining operators are staged in 3 locations, Webb began, his voice all business now, the silver-haired diplomat replaced by the tactical commander he'd once been. 4 men in a warehouse in the industrial district, 4 more in a luxury apartment overlooking the harbor, and the final 4 maintaining mobile surveillance positions. They're compartmentalized. If one cell is compromised, the others can continue operations independently. Jack studied the map, his mind automatically calculating sight lines, escape routes, choke points. 12 years might have passed, but tactical analysis was like breathing, once learned, impossible to forget. You're tracking them how? Electronic surveillance, human intelligence? Both, Webb said. NSA gave us access to their cell tower data after tonight's incident qualified as domestic terrorism. We've identified the burner phones Volk's using, traced their communication patterns, and isolated their probable staging areas. The apartment is confirmed. We have eyes on it right now. Thermal imaging shows 4 heat signatures. The warehouse is 90% certain based on vehicle movements and purchases made at a nearby tactical supply store. And the mobile units? Webb's expression tightened. Those are the problem. They're professionals who understand counter-surveillance. They move in patterns designed to defeat tracking, switch vehicles every few hours, never stay in one location long enough for us to establish reliable observation. We know they exist because of intercepted communications, but their current positions are unknown. Jack saw the operational challenge immediately. Taking down the warehouse and apartment cells would be relatively straightforward. Static targets, known positions, ability to establish superiority of force. But the mobile units represented a wild card, a threat that could materialize from any direction at any moment. What's the bait scenario? Jack asked. How are you planning to draw them out? Webb pulled up another layer on the tactical display, showing Sterling Tower and the surrounding blocks. Ms. Lane returns to her penthouse here in the tower. We make it look like normal security, her regular protection detail, nothing unusual. But we have DIA tactical teams staged in adjacent buildings, aerial surveillance, and a perimeter that will trigger the moment any Volk operators move within 3 blocks. They'll spot the perimeter, Jack said flatly. These aren't amateurs. They'll have done reconnaissance, identified your surveillance positions, planned approach vectors that minimize exposure. Which is why you're not part of the perimeter, Webb said, pulling up a schematic of Sterling Tower itself. You'll be inside the penthouse with Ms. Lane, close protection. When Volk makes their move, you'll be the last line of defense until our tactical teams can collapse the perimeter and neutralize the threat. Jack studied the tower schematic, noting entry points, stairwells, elevator banks. They won't come through the front door, too exposed, too many security checkpoints. They'll infiltrate through service entrances or maintenance access, probably using the same inside contact who helped them during their reconnaissance. We've locked down those access points, Webb assured him. Every service entrance, every maintenance tunnel, every ventilation shaft large enough for human access, all monitored, all secured. You're assuming they'll use known access points, Jack countered. Professional operators create their own entry vectors. Exterior wall breaches, roof insertions, even climbing the building's facade if they have the equipment. He paused, a memory surfacing from his Task Force 6 days. In Kandahar, we infiltrated a supposedly secure compound by rappelling down from the adjacent building's roof. Everyone was watching the ground-level approaches. Nobody thought to look up. Webb's expression showed grudging respect. Point taken. We'll add aerial observation assets and establish rooftop security. Anything else? Jack was about to respond when his combat instincts, dormant for years but now fully awake, registered something wrong. It was subtle, more feeling than fact, but in his old life, ignoring those feelings had been the difference between mission success and body bags. This entire plan assumes Volk doesn't know about DIA involvement, Jack said slowly. But they had to know the ballroom operation failed. They had to have extraction protocols, emergency communications. Which means their remaining operators know that 3 of their teammates were captured and are probably talking to federal interrogators right now. Webb's face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. The 3 suspects from the ballroom are currently in DIA custody.
They're being interrogated, but so far they've refused to provide any intelligence. So Volk's leadership knows you have their people, Jack pressed. They know Isabella Lane is under federal protection. They know the operation is compromised. Why would they continue? Why not abort, cut their losses, and disappear? Because they're being paid $20 million, Webb said. And Volk's reputation depends on contract completion. If they abort now, they lose not just this payment, but future contracts. In the private military world, reputation is everything. Jack wasn't convinced. Something about the operational logic felt wrong, like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, but had been forced into place anyway. Professional military contractors valued their lives more than their reputations. You couldn't spend money when you were dead, unless the money wasn't the real motivation. Who's paying them? Jack asked. You said Chinese state-owned enterprise, but which one? And why is this Prometheus research worth $20 million and a high-risk operation in American territory? Webb hesitated, and Jack recognized the pause of someone deciding how much classified information to reveal. The research Dr. Chen stole involves next-generation energy systems, specifically compact fusion reactors with military applications. The breakthrough that Sterling Enterprises announced wasn't just civilian technology. It was the key to portable high-energy weapons systems, advanced propulsion, even tactical nuclear devices small enough to fit in a briefcase. The implications hit Jack like a freight train. This wasn't corporate espionage. This was proliferation of weapons technology that could fundamentally alter the global balance of power. If China acquired functional compact fusion research, they could develop weapons systems that would make current American military superiority irrelevant. Jesus Christ, Jack breathed. How much of this does Isabella Lane understand? Does she know she didn't just steal corporate secrets? She helped create the next generation of weapons of mass destruction? Ms. Lane believed she was developing civilian energy technology, Webb said. And to be fair, the applications are dual use. Compact fusion could revolutionize power generation, enable space exploration, solve climate change, but it could also enable weapons that make current nuclear arsenals look primitive by comparison. Jack's tactical assessment recalibrated. If the stakes were this high, if the Chinese government was this invested in acquiring the research, then Volk wasn't just protecting their reputation. They were operating under orders that probably included success or death clauses, the kind of contracts where failure meant more than just lost future business. You're not planning to capture them, Jack said, understanding dawning. You're planning to kill them, all of them, because you can't risk any intelligence about the Prometheus research escaping, and you can't risk Volk operators reporting back about American capabilities. Webb met his gaze steadily. This is a zero-sum operation, Commander. Either we eliminate the threat permanently, or we accept that hostile foreign actors have detailed knowledge of America's most classified weapons research. Those are the only two outcomes that preserve national security. What about the legal justifications you mentioned? The Attorney General's office, the whole "we have lawyers for this" speech? We have lawyers, Webb confirmed. Very good lawyers who will ensure that everything we do tonight falls into legally defensible gray areas. Self-defense, protection of federal witnesses, prevention of imminent terrorist acts. Take your pick. They're all technically accurate and completely false. Jack had operated in those gray areas before, during his Task Force 6 days. Missions where the official record bore no resemblance to what actually happened, where enemy combatants died in ways that couldn't be traced back to American operators, where success was measured in problems that quietly disappeared rather than headlines that loudly celebrated. He'd walked away from that world because Sarah had shown him there was another way to live, another way to measure success and honor and worth. And now Webb was asking him to walk back into the shadows, to become the ghost again, to accept that some problems could only be solved with violence. I want it on record, Jack said quietly, that I'm doing this under protest, that I believe there are alternatives that don't require killing 12 men, regardless of their intentions or affiliations. But I also understand that my daughter's safety depends on Volk being neutralized permanently. So I'll do what you're asking, Deputy Director. I'll be the ghost one more time. That's all I needed to hear, Webb said, and if there was relief in his voice, he hit it well. Let's discuss operational details. Timing, equipment, rules of engagement. The next 90 minutes passed in a blur of tactical planning that felt simultaneously foreign and familiar.
Jack found himself slipping back into old patterns, thinking in terms of kill zones and fields of fire, calculating ballistic trajectories and breach timings, speaking in the clipped professional language of operators discussing violence with clinical detachment. Webb provided equipment that Jack recognized from his Task Force 6 days, a Heckler & Koch MP7 personal defense weapon, compact and devastatingly effective at close quarters, a tactical vest with ceramic plate inserts that might stop rifle rounds, communications gear that would keep him linked to Webb's command center, a tactical knife whose weight and balance felt like greeting an old friend. Rules of engagement are simple, Webb explained as Jack checked the MP7's action, muscle memory guiding his hands through the inspection process. Positive identification of hostile intent before engagement. Minimize collateral damage. Preserve Ms. Lane's life above all other considerations, including your own. As Jack looked up from the weapon. Including my own? You volunteered for this mission, Commander. You understood the risks, but Ms. Lane is a civilian who made a mistake. She doesn't deserve to die because of it. If it comes down to a choice between her life and yours, you make the right call. It was a suicide mission disguised as a protection detail, and they both knew it. But Jack had made his peace with that possibility the moment he'd sent Ella away with Marcus. Better he die trying to create a safe world for his daughter than live while threats circled ever closer. Understood, Jack said simply. The final briefing included introduction to the DIA tactical team, 8 operators who would form the outer perimeter, all of them with Special Forces backgrounds, all of them looking at Jack with expressions that mixed respect and curiosity. They'd clearly been briefed on who the Ghost was, what Task Force 6 had accomplished, and why bringing a retired operator out of civilian life was worth the risk. Their team leader, a Marine named Captain Sarah Chen, approached Jack after the briefing. Commander Turner, it's an honor, sir. I wrote my master's thesis on Task Force 6's operational methodologies. Your zero casualty record was legendary. Was, Jack emphasized. That was a different person, a different time. Tonight, I'm just backup captain. You and your team are the primary response force. I'm the last resort if everything else fails. Chen nodded, but her expression suggested she understood exactly what Jack's presence meant. Webb expected things to go wrong, expected the tactical team to be insufficient, expected that only a Ghost-level operator could ensure mission success. Isabella Lane was brought into the operations center looking exhausted, her perfect corporate facade cracked by hours of interrogation and the slowly dawning realization of what her pursuit of technological advancement had unleashed. She changed into tactical casual clothing, jeans, boots, a jacket that wouldn't restrict movement, and accepted the bulletproof vest Webb offered with the numb compliance of someone in shock. Ms. Lane, Jack said quietly, moving to where she stood apart from the tactical preparations. I need you to understand what's about to happen. We're using you as bait to draw out Volk's remaining operators. There's a significant possibility that they'll breach the penthouse security. When that happens, your only job is to do exactly what I tell you, immediately, without question. Can you do that? Isabella's eyes focused on him, and he saw steel beneath the exhaustion. I built a Fortune 500 company from nothing, Mr. Turner. I'm not some helpless damsel who'll freeze when things get difficult. If you tell me to run, I run. If you tell me to hide, I hide. If you tell me to fight, I'll grab whatever weapon is available and fight. Just keep me alive long enough to fix the mistake I made trusting Dr. Chen. Jack respected that answer. The best way you can help me keep you alive is by not being brave. Bravery gets civilians killed. Smart compliance keeps them breathing. When things start happening, and they will happen fast, your instinct will be to freeze, to try to understand what's occurring. Ignore that instinct. Move first, understand later. Got it, Isabella said. Move first, understand later. Webb called them over to the tactical table one final time. It's 11:47 p.m. Volk's operational window opens in 13 minutes. Ms. Lane, you're heading up to your penthouse now, along with Commander Turner and 2 members of your regular security detail. Everyone maintains normal procedures. You're exhausted from a difficult day, heading home, nothing unusual. Captain Chen's team is already in position in adjacent buildings. Aerial surveillance is active. We have every advantage except knowing exactly when and where Volk will strike. Any intelligence from the captured operators? Jack asked.
They're still refusing to talk, Webb admitted. But we did recover encrypted communication devices. NSA is working on breaking the encryption, but so far, no luck. We're operating under the assumption that Volk knows we're waiting for them and has adjusted their tactics accordingly, which meant whatever was coming would be unexpected, creative, and probably more violent than the ballroom assault. Volk's leadership would have analyzed what went wrong the first time, would have identified Jack as the variable that disrupted their operation, and would be planning accordingly. "Let's move," Webb said. "And Commander, Sarah made you promise to give Ella a normal life. Make sure you survive tonight to keep that promise." The trip up to Isabella's penthouse felt surreal. Riding a private elevator with bulletproof glass, passing through security checkpoints that included retinal scans and biometric verification, entering a living space that occupied the entire top floor of Sterling Tower with 360-degree views of the city lights. Isabella's regular security detail, two competent professionals named Rodriguez and Thompson, took positions by the main entrance, their awareness heightened but their demeanor professional. They'd been briefed on the situation, knew they were bait in a trap designed to catch Russian military contractors, and had volunteered for duty despite the risks. Jack moved through the penthouse, checking sight lines and cover positions with the automatic thoroughness of his training. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular views but zero tactical advantage. They were just expensive backstops for any rounds that missed their targets. The furniture was designer quality, but fragile, nothing that would stop bullets or provide meaningful concealment. The kitchen area had a granite counter that might offer some protection, but the layout was open concept, designed for entertaining rather than defense. "Your penthouse is a tactical nightmare," Jack informed Isabella, who'd collapsed onto a leather sofa that probably cost more than a car. "No choke points, minimal cover, too many access vectors. If I were planning an assault on this location, I'd rate it as ideal for attackers, terrible for defenders." "I'll keep that in mind when I'm redecorating," Isabella said dryly. "Assuming I survive long enough to redecorate." Jack's communications earpiece crackled to life. "Ghost, this is Overwatch," Webb's voice came through clearly despite the encryption. "All teams report ready. Perimeter is established. We have visual confirmation on the warehouse cell, 4 operators loading equipment into a van. Apartment cell remains static. Mobile units still unaccounted for." "Copy Overwatch," Jack responded, feeling the old combat calm settling over him like a familiar coat. His heart rate was steady, his breathing controlled, his mind clear of everything except tactical considerations. "Be advised, the primary location has minimal defensive advantages. Recommend repositioning more assets closer to the building." "Negative, Ghost. Moving assets now would tip our hand. Maintain position and stand by." Time passed with the peculiar distortion of pre-combat waiting. Minutes felt like hours. Every sound amplified, every shadow potentially hostile. Rodriguez and Thompson maintained their positions with professional discipline, but Jack could see the tension in their shoulders, the way their hands stayed close to their weapons. Isabella had stopped pretending to relax, sitting upright on the sofa, her eyes moving between Jack and the penthouse entrance. "How many operations like this have you done?" she asked quietly. "Waiting for violence you know is coming but can't prevent?" "More than I can count," Jack said. "Less than I'd like to remember." "Do you get scared before it starts?" Jack considered lying, offering some platitude about training overcoming fear. But Isabella deserved honesty, especially if these were potentially her final hours. Every single time. Fear is what keeps you alive. It sharpens your reflexes, heightens your awareness, makes you take threats seriously. The soldiers who claim they never feel fear are either lying or dangerously unstable. The trick isn't eliminating fear. It's controlling it, using it, not letting it control you. Before Isabella could respond, Webb's voice exploded through the communications channel. All units, warehouse cell is mobile, heading towards Sterling Tower. ETA 12 minutes. Apartment cell is also moving. This is not a drill. Ghost, you have incoming hostiles, multiple vectors, estimated 8 to 12 operators. Rules of engagement are now active. Jack's body responded before his conscious mind finished processing, moving toward Isabella with fluid economy. Time to move. Kitchen, behind the granite counter, stay low and stay quiet. Isabella complied instantly, her earlier promise of smart compliance proving accurate. She moved fast but controlled, getting into position while Jack established his primary defensive position near the main entrance, giving him overlapping fields of fire that covered both the door and the service entrance that led to the building's mechanical spaces. "Rodriguez, Thompson, tighten your positions," Jack ordered. "They're going to come hard and fast. Your job is to slow them down, force them into kill zones, and survive long enough for the tactical teams to arrive. Do not try to be heroes." Both men acknowledged with curt nods, checking their weapons, settling into defensive stances that suggested competence if not quite Special Forces level proficiency. Webb's voice provided continuous updates. "Warehouse cell ETA 9 minutes. Apartment cell ETA 11 minutes. Aerial surveillance has visual on both vehicles. Still no contact with mobile units. Ghost, be advised they could already be in the building." Jack's instincts were screaming now, that primitive warning system that had kept him alive through too many impossible situations. Something was wrong with this scenario. The timing was too perfect, the approach too obvious. Professional operators didn't announce their arrival like this, didn't move in vehicles that could be tracked by satellite surveillance, unless they wanted to be tracked. "Overwatch, Ghost," Jack said urgently. "I think we're missing something. The warehouse and apartment cells are a diversion. The real threat is already in the building, the mobile units we couldn't track. They've been here the whole time, waiting for us to focus on the obvious approaches." Webb's pause lasted 3 heartbeats, an eternity in tactical time. "Explain your reasoning, Ghost." "Volk knows we captured 3 of their operators. They know those operators will eventually talk, providing intelligence on Volk's methods and capabilities. The smart play isn't to send more operators through approaches we're obviously watching. The smart play is to sacrifice the cells we can track while the operators we can't track achieve the objective." "You're suggesting the warehouse and apartment cells are bait?" "I'm suggesting they're either bait or they're planning something we haven't anticipated. Either way, the threat isn't 12 minutes out. It's already here." As if summoning them by speaking their existence, Jack's ears caught a sound that didn't belong. The whisper of fabric against metal, coming from the service entrance. Too quiet for civilian hearing, but unmistakable to someone trained to detect infiltration. "Contact service entrance," Jack said quietly into his mic, bringing the MP7 to his shoulder, sight picture perfect, finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. "I have movement. No visual yet. Rodriguez, Thompson, reorient on my position." The service entrance door exploded inward, not with the controlled breach of professional operators, but with the devastating violence of shaped charges designed to destroy obstacles and disorient defenders. The blast wave hit like a physical fist, accompanied by flashbang grenades that turned the penthouse into a hellscape of light and noise. Jack's training saved him. He'd closed his eyes and opened his mouth the instant before detonation, minimizing the disorientation. He fired through the smoke and debris, controlled 3-round bursts aimed at the doorway where operators would be entering, using sound and memory to guide his shots since vision was temporarily useless. He heard the distinctive sound of bullets hitting body armor, heard someone grunt in pain, heard boots on marble as figures moved through the breach with professional coordination. His vision cleared in time to see 4 operators in full tactical gear flowing into the penthouse, weapons up, moving in practiced patterns that spoke of hundreds of hours of training. Jack's first burst caught the lead operator in the hip, below where his armor protected, sending him down with a scream. The second burst forced the remaining 3 into cover behind furniture that wouldn't stop bullets but broke their sight lines. Rodriguez and Thompson were firing now too, their weapons adding to the chaos, but they were out of position and their shots went wide. One of the Volk operators, a woman with ice-cold eyes visible through her tactical mask, put a precise burst into Thompson's center mass. His armor caught most of it, but the impact sent him stumbling backward, gasping for air. Jack moved, because staying still meant dying. He flowed across the penthouse, using furniture and walls for momentary concealment, getting angles on the operators that their armor couldn't protect. His MP7 barked twice more, catching one operator in the thigh and another in the shoulder, disabling shots, professional shots, the kind of marksmanship that came from thousands of hours on ranges and in kill houses. But there were still 2 operators active, and Jack's movement had exposed him. The female operator had him dead to rights, her rifle coming around with mechanical precision, and Jack knew with absolute certainty that he'd made a tactical error that would cost him his life. The shot never came. Instead, the operator's head snapped sideways as a gunshot echoed from the kitchen area. Jack's eyes tracked the trajectory and found Isabella Lane standing behind the granite counter, Rodriguez's backup pistol in her hands, recovered from where he'd fallen, smoke still wisping from the barrel. "I said I'd fight," Isabella said, her voice shaking but her hands steady. The final Volk operator made a tactical decision, his training recognizing that the operation had failed, that his teammates were down, that extraction was more important than objective completion. He retreated toward the service entrance, laying down suppressing fire that forced Jack to take cover, and disappeared into the smoke still pouring from the breached doorway. "Overwatch, Ghost," Jack gasped into his mic, checking himself for wounds and finding none. 4 operators neutralized, 1 escaped through service entrance. "We need medical now. Thompson is down, Rodriguez is wounded, Isabella Lane is secure." Webb's response was drowned out by the sound of helicopters descending toward the building's roof and the thunder of boots as Captain Chen's tactical team breached through the main entrance. Within seconds, the penthouse was swarming with DIA operators, medics rushing to the wounded, weapons trained on the downed Volk contractors. Captain Chen appeared at Jack's side, her expression mixing relief and respect. "Hell of a defensive action, Commander. 4 hostiles down, 1 civilian saved, minimal friendly casualties. That's exactly what your reputation suggested you were capable of." Jack barely heard her. His eyes were on Isabella, who dropped the pistol and collapsed behind the granite counter, shaking with post-combat adrenaline. He moved to her side, kneeling, checking for wounds and finding only shock. "You saved my life," Jack said quietly. "That operator had me dead. If you hadn't taken that shot, move first, understand later," Isabella quoted back at him, her voice breaking. "That's what you told me. So when I saw her aiming at you, I moved. I grabbed the gun. I aimed. I fired. Understanding can come later." Webb's voice came through multiple channels simultaneously, addressing both Jack and the tactical teams. "All units, warehouse and apartment cells, have been intercepted by FBI tactical units. No resistance. They surrendered immediately upon being surrounded. Initial interrogation suggests they were indeed a diversion, sent to draw our attention while the mobile unit executed the actual assault." "One of the mobile unit escaped," Jack reported. "Last seen heading into building mechanical spaces. He's wounded. I hit him at least once, but mobile. Consider him armed and extremely dangerous." "Already on it," Webb responded. "We're sealing the building, deploying K9 units, and flooding the mechanical spaces with surveillance drones. He's not getting out of Sterling Tower alive." The medics had Rodriguez and Thompson stabilized, both men conscious and talking despite their wounds. The 3 downed Volk operators, the hip shot, thigh shot, and shoulder shot, were being treated with professional efficiency before being zip-tied for transport to DIA custody. The 4th operator, the one Isabella had shot, lay motionless under a medical sheet, the first casualty of the night. Jack felt the weight of that death even though he hadn't fired the killing shot. He'd created the tactical situation that made Isabella's action necessary. He'd drawn the Ghost back from retirement, had accepted Webb's mission, had agreed to violence as a solution. The blood on the penthouse floor was on his hands as much as anyone's. "Commander Turner?" Captain Chen was speaking to him, concern evident in her voice. "Sir, are you injured? You're bleeding from your left arm." Jack looked down and discovered she was right. A graze wound, probably from a ricochet. Nothing serious, but bleeding steadily through his tactical vest. He hadn't even felt it during the firefight, adrenaline and training overriding pain signals. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "Just a scratch." "Medic," Chen called, and within moments Jack was being treated by a young woman with steady hands who cleaned and bandaged the wound with practiced efficiency. The penthouse slowly transformed from an active combat zone to a secured crime scene. Evidence markers appeared. Photographers documented everything, and federal agents in suits and credentials began the tedious process of collecting statements and establishing official narratives. Webb appeared through the chaos, his tactical gear replaced by his civilian suit, somehow looking fresh despite commanding an operation for the past 6 hours. "Commander, Ms. Lane, we need to discuss what happens next." They relocated to Isabella's home office, one of the few rooms in the penthouse that hadn't been damaged by the assault, where Webb laid out the immediate future with bureaucratic precision. The official story is that Russian intelligence operatives attempted to kidnap Ms. Lane to acquire classified information she'd unknowingly received from Dr. Chen. Federal agents intercepted the operation, resulting in 4 suspects wounded, 1 fatality, and 8 additional arrests. The civilian contractor who assisted in Ms. Lane's defense, that's you, Commander, will be officially commended but kept out of media coverage for security reasons. What about the Prometheus research? Isabella asked. The real reason Volk wanted me? Sterling Enterprises will transfer all related research, data, and prototypes to the Department of Defense, Webb said. It wasn't a request. In exchange, you'll receive immunity from prosecution for the initial acquisition of classified materials. The official position will be that Dr. Chen misrepresented the research's classification status, making you an unwitting victim rather than a willing participant. That's generous, Isabella said quietly. More generous than I deserve. It's pragmatic, Webb corrected. Prosecuting you helps no one and exposes information we'd prefer to keep classified. Taking the Prometheus research back solves our proliferation concerns. And you've learned an expensive lesson about verifying your sources' claims regarding classified materials. Isabella nodded, accepting the terms with visible relief. And what happens to me now? Am I still in danger? Will Volk send more operators? Volk Tactical will cease operations in American territory, Webb said with absolute confidence. We have 8 of their operators in custody, all of whom are looking at decades in federal prison. We've also seized their financial assets, communications infrastructure, and made it clear through diplomatic channels that any further action against American citizens will result in consequences that extend beyond simple law enforcement. Which was diplomat speak for, "We'll kill everyone involved and burn your organization to the ground," Jack translated mentally. So I'm safe, Isabella said, as if testing the words to see if they felt true. As safe as anyone can be in this world, Webb confirmed. You'll maintain security for the next few months while we ensure Volk's compliance, but yes, the immediate threat has been neutralized. Isabella turned to Jack, her expression complex. Gratitude and guilt, and something that might have been respect. Mr. Turner, I don't know how to properly thank someone for saving your life multiple times in one night, but I'd like to try. Name anything, money, employment, resources, and it's yours. Jack thought about what he actually needed. Not money. He'd lived on minimal resources for 12 years and could continue indefinitely. Not employment. Returning to corporate work after tonight felt impossible. What he needed was something money couldn't buy, but power and connections might provide. I need to disappear again, Jack said quietly. Not just me, my daughter too. New identities, new location, the kind of comprehensive disappearance that prevents foreign intelligence agencies from tracking us down. Can you help with that? Isabella looked at Webb, who nodded slowly. That can be arranged. The DIA has resources for relocating assets who've been compromised. New names, new histories, documentation that will pass any background check. You'll essentially become different people. And my daughter's education? Her future? I can't have her paying the price for my past. Full scholarship to any institution she qualifies for, routed through a legitimate foundation that won't raise questions, Webb said, along with a trust fund sufficient to provide for her needs through adulthood. Considerate payment for services rendered and insurance against you ever discussing what you've seen and done. It was a good deal, better than Jack had expected. But there was one more thing he needed, one more piece of the normal life he'd promised Sarah he'd give their daughter. I want Marcus Chen included in the relocation package, Jack said. He's been protecting my daughter tonight, and he's the only family she has beyond me. Whatever new identity we're getting, he needs to be part of it. Done, Webb agreed without hesitation. Anything else? Jack looked around Isabella's office, at the expensive furniture and corporate awards, the visible markers of success and achievement. Then he thought about Ella, probably asleep in Marcus's mountain cabin, dreaming of stars and coloring books and a father who always came home. I want my daughter to never know what I did tonight, Jack said. I want her to grow up believing her father was just a janitor who got lucky, who happened to be in the right place at the right time. Not the ghost, not a killer, just Dad.
Webb studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. That's probably not possible, Commander. The videos from the ballroom are still circulating. Journalists are already investigating your background, trying to piece together how a maintenance worker could move like a special forces operator. Eventually, someone will connect the dots. We'll discover that Jack Turner died 12 years ago in Afghanistan, and that the ghost walked out of those mountains alive. Then I'll deal with that when it happens, Jack said. But for now, for as long as possible, I want Ella to have normal. To have the childhood I promised her mother she'd have. That's what I'm asking for, Deputy Director. Not money, not glory, not recognition, just the chance to be a father instead of a weapon. Webb's expression softened fractionally. You're a better man than most of the people I work with, Commander. Better than most of the people I've commanded. The world needs weapons, needs people willing to do hard things in dark places. But it also needs fathers who love their daughters more than they love violence. He extended his hand. You'll have your normal life, Jack Turner. Or whatever your new name ends up being. The ghost can finally rest. Jack shook his hand, feeling the weight of 12 years lifting slightly. Not gone, violence left marks that never fully faded, but lighter. Manageable. The debriefing took another 2 hours, every detail documented, every decision justified, every bullet accounted for. Jack gave his statement with professional precision, edited to remove anything that might reveal just how much tactical knowledge he still possessed, how easily he'd slipped back into the ghost patterns. Dawn was breaking over the city when Jack finally left Sterling Tower, escorted by DIA agents who drove him to a safe house where Marcus and Ella were waiting. The mountain cabin Webb had mentioned was real, isolated, secure, and currently serving as temporary housing while the relocation paperwork was processed. Ella was awake when Jack arrived, sitting on the cabin's porch with Marcus, watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and amber. She saw the SUV approaching and was running before it fully stopped, her small body colliding with Jack's with enough force to make him stagger. "You came back," she sobbed into his chest. "You promised, and you came back." "Always, baby girl," Jack murmured, holding her tight enough that he could feel her heartbeat, reassuring himself that she was real, safe, whole. "Always." Marcus approached more slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "How bad?" 4 down, 1 civilian casualty, 1 escaped but wounded, Jack said quietly over Ella's head. "The threat is neutralized. We're getting relocated, new identities, the full package. You're included if you want." "Do I want to give up my comfortable civilian consulting business to go on the run with my former commanding officer and his daughter?" Marcus pretended to consider. "Yeah, Jack, I'm in. Sarah made me promise to look after both of you. Figure this makes keeping that promise easier." They went inside the cabin, where a breakfast neither man had cooked was waiting. DIA catering, apparently even safe houses, came with food service. Ella ate pancakes while Jack and Marcus drank coffee and didn't talk about the violence that had occurred hours earlier, the lives ended and changed, the impossible decisions made. "There's something I need to tell you," Jack said to Ella once she'd finished eating, once the morning sun had burned away the last shadows of night. "About what happened. About who your father used to be." "The ghost," Ella said simply, making Jack freeze. "I heard Deputy Director Webb talking. I heard the agents calling you Commander. I know you were a soldier, Daddy. A special kind of soldier who did dangerous things." Jack exchanged glances with Marcus, who shrugged as if to say, "Kids hear everything." "Yes," Jack confirmed, because lying served no purpose now. "I was the ghost. A long time ago, I led a team of soldiers who did missions that other soldiers couldn't do. We were good at it. We never lost anyone, never failed a mission where failure would cost lives." "But you walked away," Ella said, "because you met Mom, because you wanted to be normal. Because your mom showed me that being a weapon wasn't the same as being a man," Jack corrected gently. "She taught me that real strength isn't about how well you fight. It's about what you fight for, who you protect, who you love." Ella was quiet for a long moment, her 9-year-old mind processing concepts that most adults struggled with. "Are you going to be the ghost again? Now that everyone knows?" "No," Jack said firmly. "The ghost is retired permanently. From now on, I'm just Dad.
We're going to move somewhere new, start over with new names, and you're going to go to a good school and make friends and have the completely normal, boring childhood that every kid deserves.
So, can we get a dog? Ella asked, because children's priorities were beautifully, blessedly simple.
Yes, Jack laughed, feeling the darkness of the past night receding. We can absolutely get a dog, any kind you want. I want a big one that can protect us if bad guys come back. The bad guys aren't coming back, Marcus assured her. Your dad made sure of that. He's very good at making sure bad guys don't come back. Ella seemed satisfied with that answer, returning to her pancakes with the resilience that children possessed, the ability to process trauma and move forward without carrying the same scars adults accumulated. Jack watched his daughter eat and felt something settle in his chest. Not quite peace, but maybe the beginning of it. He'd walked back into the shadows one final time, had become the ghost for one more mission. But he'd done it to protect what mattered most, to ensure that Ella could grow up without looking over her shoulder, without fear that her father's past would destroy her future. The official paperwork for their relocation arrived within a week. Jack Turner became Michael Sullivan, a widowed architect from Portland with a daughter named Emma. Marcus Chen became David Sullivan, Michael's brother, a software consultant working remotely. The identities were thorough, complete with work histories and references and digital footprints that suggested lives lived quietly and unremarkably. They moved to a small town in Montana, the kind of place where neighbors brought casseroles to welcome newcomers, and the biggest crime was teenagers tipping cows. The house was modest but comfortable, with a yard big enough for Emma's promised dog, a golden retriever mix from the local shelter that she named Starlight. Michael Sullivan found work with a local architecture firm, designing homes and municipal buildings, using skills he'd actually possessed in his previous life to create something lasting and beautiful. David Sullivan established his consulting business in the house's converted garage, providing cybersecurity advice to companies that never realized they were being protected by one of the military's former top intelligence specialists. And Emma Sullivan attended 4th grade at the local elementary school, where her teachers commented on her maturity, her kindness, and the beautiful artwork she created featuring stars and constellations and families holding hands beneath impossibly bright skies. 6 months after the night at Sterling Tower, Michael received a package with no return address. Inside was a tablet loaded with news articles about the Russian intelligence operation that had been thwarted by federal agents. The stories mentioned Isabella Lane, who'd resigned from Sterling Enterprises to pursue philanthropic work in educational access and clean energy. They mentioned the 8 Russian operatives facing trial for attempted kidnapping and industrial espionage. They mentioned the unnamed federal contractor who'd assisted in Ms. Lane's rescue. What the articles didn't mention was the Ghost, or Task Force 6, or any of the classified operations that had defined Jack Turner's first life. Webb had kept his promise. The past stayed buried, allowing the present to flourish. There was one final item in the package, a photograph of Isabella Lane at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for a new STEM education center she'd funded. She was smiling, genuine and relaxed in a way she never had at Sterling Enterprises. Across the bottom, in handwriting that suggested expensive private schools and calligraphy lessons, was a message. Thank you for showing me what truly matters. Your courage saved more than my life. It saved my perspective. I hope you found the peace you deserve. Michael showed the photograph to David over coffee on the porch, while Emma played with Starlight in the yard, her laughter carrying on the mountain breeze. Think we actually got away with it? David asked. Think the past will really stay past? Michael watched his daughter, saw her throw a tennis ball that Starlight retrieved with boundless enthusiasm, saw her collapse in the grass laughing when the dog licked her face, saw, for the first time in 12 years, something that looked like the normal childhood Sarah had made him promise to provide. I think, Michael said slowly, that the past is always with us. What happened at Sterling Tower, what I did, who I was, that doesn't just disappear, but it doesn't have to define us either. Emma knows I was a soldier. She knows I fought when I had to. But she also knows that I chose her over violence, chose building a life over destroying threats, chose being dad over being the ghost. That's very philosophical for a Wednesday morning, David said dryly. I've had a lot of time to think about it, Michael admitted. Every day for 6 months, I've woken up expecting someone to have found us, expecting the past to have caught up. And every day? It hasn't. We're just three people living in Montana, a single father, his brother, and his daughter. Normal, unremarkable. Boring, David added. Perfectly, beautifully boring, Michael agreed. Emma ran up to the porch, Starlight bounding beside her, both of them covered in grass stains and dog hair. Uncle David, can we go to the lake this weekend? My friend Sarah said there's good fishing. Absolutely, David said. Your dad claims he was quite the fisherman back in the day. We should test that claim. I never claimed that, Michael protested, but he was smiling. I said I'd been fishing exactly once and caught nothing. Then this weekend you'll catch something, Emma declared with the absolute confidence of childhood. Because we're the Sullivans, and Sullivans can do anything if we try hard enough. Michael met David's eyes over Emma's head, saw his old teammate fighting back emotion. Because Emma was right, in a way. Not that they could do anything, but that trying mattered. That showing up for each other, for family, for the small daily acts of love and care was its own kind of courage, its own kind of victory. You're absolutely right, sweetheart, Michael said, pulling Emma into a hug while Starlight wagged her tail hard enough to create a small windstorm. The Sullivans can do anything, and you know what we're going to do right now? What? We're going to go inside, make some lunch, and then spend the afternoon doing absolutely nothing dangerous, exciting, or interesting. Just a regular family on a regular Wednesday. Emma wrinkled her nose. That sounds kind of boring, Dad. That's the point, baby girl, Michael said, and realized he meant it with every fiber of his being. That's exactly the point. They went inside together, leaving the porch and the Montana mountains and the past that had nearly destroyed them. Jack Turner, commander, ghost, weapon, stayed outside with the morning sun and the memories of missions that would never be declassified. Inside was Michael Sullivan, father, architect, man trying desperately to be normal. And that was enough. That was everything. Later that evening, after Emma was asleep and David had retreated to his garage office, Michael stood at his daughter's bedroom door, watching her breathe in the peaceful rhythm of childhood dreams. Starlight lay at the foot of her bed, already adapting to his role as protector and companion. The silver ring still sat on Michael's left hand because some promises transcended identities. The inscription, Ghost 6 Omnia, remained hidden, visible only to those who knew what to look for. It was a reminder, a memorial, a promise that the man who'd walked out of the Hindu Kush mountains had become something better than a weapon. He'd become a father who kept his promises, a man who'd fought his last battle not for medals or missions, but for his daughter's right to draw pictures of stars without fear. A man who'd finally understood what Sarah had been trying to teach him all along. That true strength wasn't measured in successful operations or zero casualty records. It was measured in moments like this, a sleeping child, safe and loved, dreaming of fishing trips and dog names and all the perfectly normal things that children should dream about. The ghost was gone, buried beneath paperwork and new identities and the quiet dignity of a life lived in the light rather than the shadows. And in his place stood Michael Sullivan, father, protector, ordinary man with an extraordinary past that he'd traded for the most valuable thing in the world, the chance to watch his daughter grow up. Outside, the Montana stars blazed in patterns Emma would learn to name, constellations that would guide her through a future her father had fought to secure. Inside, Michael Sullivan turned off the light, whispered, "Love you, baby girl," to his sleeping daughter, and closed the door on the ghosts of his past. Some men were born to be weapons. But the best men, Michael had finally learned, were the ones who chose to be fathers instead. And that choice, made every single day in 1,000 small ways, was the truest victory he'd ever achieved.